flight because my dad in Detroit. He's in the hospital with him.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He's going to be all right. I just want to visit him. So.
Okay.
I have to leave at 8:30 for that. I'll get the pups out. Maybe we'll
Catch you guys a little bit more.
Can I get one of those?
Sure.
You said you had them printed out, so I
I
didn't
did.
want to print out
Yeah,
another
that's
one
cool.
before we
I
can.
put some over there in case anybody comes in as well. That's pretty close, but what is that? I'd like to call to order that we should open the, oh, I have to wait for. Are we set to go? Yeah. Okay, I'd like to call to order to move to open the meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Before we, I'd like to propose a change to the agenda. I would like to address the idea of a default chair for meetings when I can't be here. Do we mind, does everybody second that?
Second.
Yeah,
To add that.
good.
Okay, and everybody approves, say aye?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, do you just type that into the agenda, or shall I write it on a copy?
Well, do you need to have it in the agenda that the discussion's opened?
No, just,
That you
That you need to
added the
appoint
topic
one.
to
That we
the
added the
agenda.
topic.
Oh, got it.
I
Okay.
just haven't approved it yet.
Got
we
it.
haven't approved
Or
it?
did you approve it?
I asked for a vote, and everybody said aye.
Oh, okay, cool. I
Okay,
see.
thanks.
Okay,
It's okay.
That kind of day.
It is, the heat is just terrible, so I'll put that. Since some people may need to leave early, are there topics that people would choose to talk about first? Because this can actually slide off to the next meeting if we like.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the tenant applicant is going to be here or not, but that's already up there. I mean, by 8 we should hopefully get, because I want to talk about the proposed legislation too that we all saw in the email. But I'm sure that's probably one of the first things we'll go over. So.
May I ask, the minutes from the last meeting, did you have a quorum sufficient to approve them at the last meeting, or do we need to do that
Do you mean
today?
last month's meeting?
Last month's meeting?
We did not have a quorum to do anything.
Okay, so we need to approve the minutes from April then, from March, I mean. Is it March?
May.
May 18th.
I have the wrong date on here, sorry. 5/18.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the May 18th
Second.
meeting.
A second.
Second.
Everybody approve?
Uh,
Thank you. Okay. I have a copy. This is the wrong, not really. That's the wrong minutes. Sorry.
With the wrong minutes?
I
You sure?
I asked my secretary to print them out, and she printed the wrong month. This is
July 20th.
something's not right on here though.
That's the one I got in the email.
Oh, no, this was just, this number 2 should have just been deleted, because we already talked about that. Okay, sorry about that.
Yep.
Alrighty, so you think were you bringing the applicant?
No, I just saw that it was on the minutes. And
Did Amanda, somebody sent an email that they thought that it would be nice if they were bringing someone? That there was gonna be a tenant applicant?
Yeah, I didn't see that email. Maybe it wasn't.
yeah, I saw the
right,
email.
yeah.
Well, I guess they're not.
It's there, well, they're not
Yeah,
here.
they're not here,
Okay,
so
so,
it's an
all right,
easy
so we'll skip
situation.
over
I mean,
that
if
for
they show
now.
up, that's one
He
thing.
wanted to move up the default chair in case you're not here. Why don't we just blow through that?
Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
idea.
I was actually going to ask, to make a motion that Robin being the the neutral person on the board should probably fill in as the chair if everybody wants to, if anybody would like to second that.
No, second.
Second.
Assuming
Everybody
you want
approve,
that.
say aye.
Well, just from the discussions,
Oh, please, sorry, go ahead.
I have no problem with Robin, but Robin can't be there. You should, I mean, I'm fine with the chair sitting there figuring out who's going to be here and asking someone to
You mean on
fill
an
it in your absence.
an ad hoc basis?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm fine with that too. But if she's in a situation where she can't make the decision or for some reason, whatever.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So you could decide
well-
on an as-needed basis. If
I could decide on an as-needed basis based on who's going to be here when I'm not?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you know you can't be here and you're talking with Robin, I'm not going to be there, would you mind filling in as chair? You can send an email around saying, in my absence, Robin's going to be the chair.
Okay.
And we all seem to respond pretty quickly to the email, so that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, an experience with other boards is when the chair can't be there, they typically have a go-to person, but nobody's officially named.
Okay, good. Then
So
we'll leave it at that then.
just gives you a little more flexibility and.
Then we'll leave it
and
at that then.
something like
That sounds good. There was, I think, Dennis, did you post about the Welcome to New Paltz package from the town?
I didn't post about it,
Or
but
sent an email that we
Mentioned.
might want to discuss that and compare it to our current
yeah, it came from
project?
Tim and Neil and what they were looking to do.
So I guess right now I will ask, do we want to speak about the manuals and simultaneously? And what progress have we made with the one we've been looking at?
Well, last time, when we didn't have a quorum, we sort of decided to do sort of a workshop on the, what's it called, I have it here, the Tenant Bill of Rights proposed revisions. And we went through everything, and we did a whole bunch of little, let's add this, let's clarify that, zoom, and made a lot of little notes. I have put those all in a document and printed out a whole bunch of copies and left them on the printer. So,
That kind of day?
Is there a way you can email that to
Yeah.
everybody right now so I could look up with my phone?
I don't know if I have everybody's email handy. I can email to Alex. Alex, can you share out, or you know what, I'll share the Google Doc with you and you can share it with everybody else. Alex, what's the right email for you?
assistant@villageofnewpaltz.org.
So is that 4 on the agenda?
I asked if we wanted to,
I just want to know, is that, we're talking about 4?
we're talking about 4.
Okay.
So you did get it, you were able to incorporate, it wasn't a read-only document?
No, well, what I did, I took the old document, copied it, pasted it into a new document, changed the font because it was still in old,
Yeah.
like,
Great.
stuff.
Good job.
But, and I've got it marked up in a review format so that you can see the changes in green.
Oh, okay,
And, yeah, and there's a little side, I don't know if you use Google Docs much, but there's a little sidebar where it's got the change and you can make comments on each change.
Good.
So if anybody wants anything else changed in there, but basically, most of the things were just clarifications. We added a line under responsibilities and recommendations. The first thing was to check with the building department to verify that the property is registered as a rental property.
Right.
That's super important.
It really, really is. And I think that, I mean, I know when I was renting, I had no clue that was even a thing.
Yeah.
So that's definitely
I don't
important.
think
a
a
lot
lot
of
of people think that's a thing.
No, I
That's
mean,
the first thing to do.
Most of the people I know, I mean, I'm almost 30, but most of the people I know in this town are in their early 20s and they don't even know there's like a building inspector,
Right.
you know, a rental inspector.
Right. The other big change, there was one line that said, all parties should take pictures, date them, and have all parties sign them. We clarified that. All parties should document and date condition and appearance of property at beginning and end of lease and at time of any complaint. Now, there's a couple of spots where we suggested that, that whoever's reading this look to another source for further details. And I think some of those sources are things that we're going to be editing, so we'll need to update that here as we edit that.
Okay.
Those are the big changes. I think the only other one that I think specify that tenants need to adhere to all local ordinances, keep landlord informed of health and safety concerns is already in there. We added and financial concerns.
Yeah.
So if you're running
That's
into
very good.
yeah,
That's good.
if you're running into a problem, let people know. Is there anything else? Oh, and on the contacts side of the page, we added Ulster County Office for the Aging under the Senior Housing Guide. And those are all the changes on there, so the rest of it is pretty much as it was, and it's just a 2-page basic overview. So this is different from the handbook, which would be more detailed
Yeah, very
and so
detailed.
forth, but this is a good, an already established, here, take a look kind of page.
I was gonna say, since they're being directed to the building department first, have the building department have that. But they're not gonna know to go to the building department unless they already have that, so how is that gonna be
That's
distributed?
one thing we need to figure out is how do we get this information to the people who need it? And
I
then,
can, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no.
I can, once we have a completed document, we have a budget. We can go to the village board and say we would like to print these out, and we can go to the campus and have them hand them out to everybody that's coming in to live on campus,
Yeah.
to start educating them before they move off campus. If we do that like consistently every year, by the time they move off campus, they'll have received it 3 or 4 times, and hopefully it'll be beat into their heads.
I would also ask that we ask the campus to post it on their Facebook page.
Yes.
Because they're much more apt to read it there than they
That's
are
true.
here.
That's very good.
Our
I'm
campus
thinking in
needs-
my world, not the kids' world.
Our
I live in
campus-
their world.
Yeah,
Channel 23 as well.
that too.
Channel 23 should be, you know, if you're a renter, there's a handbook available.
Right.
You get it, these locations are online here.
A lot of colleges have a much more comprehensive renter's guideline package than anything that's available through City New Paltz, and it would be
Cortland
nice to
has a
see
really
that.
good one.
Albany has one.
We can offer that.
So that's the thing we need to encourage them to do.
Well, on the topic of like disseminating this information, I mean, my kind of goal on this committee, like I think I mentioned last week, is to really get it so, you know, something like this, you know, if you're going to see a property and you're meeting with the landlord to look at the property, you know, they would give you that information. So not only do you have people going around campus and stuff like that, which is great, but really, I mean, I go to SUNY, I can tell you, maybe 10% of people are gonna actually look at whatever is being passed out.
Especially in the beginning of year when you're
Exactly.
getting, here, sign this, sign that. It's like mortgage documents.
Well,
You get a
that's why,
stack of
and I
pages.
think, you know, when I brought it up, you know, everybody pretty much supported it, because that way, you know, both landlord and tenant know exactly what their rights and responsibilities are, because, you know, you've been handed an actual document. And I feel like that also helps to keep everybody, you know, above board. You know, if you have a landlord who's hesitant to give you that information about your rights, you know, that should kind of like raise a red flag, that kind of thing. So like I said, I don't know how possible it is to implement that into code or anything like that, but I definitely think it's something that we should at least suggest a lot.
We're required to give out other documents that are required by the state that have to do with lead paint and
Yeah.
other kinds of disclosures about the property.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my tenants sign in the lease that they've received that document and these are their rights
Yeah,
underneath
you
it.
brought this up when I
If you
mentioned
could
it.
add, if we added that in this village, there's an additional responsibility for the landlord to hand out that document
Mhm.
with the contract.
Well, I mean, even the tenant's right handbook from the Attorney General, because those are free, you can just
Right.
write in and get a box sent, you know what I mean? So that way we don't even have to necessarily use our budget for that. But, I mean, this should definitely all be together.
I don't print out anything. I send them an email document of the lead document from the state and then they acknowledge that they've received it.
Yep.
and
Well,
I
the
can sign it on
handbook
the
is
lease.
all online too, so if you're doing everything online.
Right, I
through
do my
PDF,
leases online.
You can have a little thing that's, you know, they have to click the link and look at it, otherwise they can't continue in the document, something like
Right.
that.
But they also initial that they've received it by email.
Yeah,
or
exactly, so that way
whichever
later on
from
they
the
can say,
landlord.
oh, I wasn't aware that this
Right.
wasn't, you know.
Alex, did you receive that? Did you go through? Okay.
But I remember when I did bring it up that we were trying to get information from the town's attorney to see, you know, the feasibility of that and how possible. Or the attorney was ever asked those questions or how to go about contacting them or anything like that.
When we have a complete document, we can send it to the attorney and get his feedback on it. I try not to use up attorney
Yeah, no.
hours unless we're at the point where we actually need them.
Cool. But it as far as you know, it sounds like it's something that would be possible. But
If, you know, from what Don's saying, it sounds
I'm
very-
not sure, what are you proposing?
That we make it a requirement that some sort
yeah,
of.
so right now, you know, a landlord has to like Valerie was saying, you know, the lead paint information, all that kind of information, as well just have, you know, either this packet or like the New York State Tenants' Right Handbook, something like that. So, you know, both landlord and tenant have acknowledged that they are aware of, you know, all of their rights.
How would you go about proving
That's the
that?
problem.
Well, that's why you have like,
The
you know,
email.
said
I understand you
email,
email, but not everybody emails it.
But-
Exactly.
Oh,
That's-
even when I was still doing leases on paper, they signed that they received the handwritten the hand-typed document.
I
that-
just don't
But
know
how do
you
we
can-
make sure that landlords are giving the document out?
Correct.
Yeah,
Is
as
there
long as
any
you
way,
can have something on the lease
why
where
have
both
a
parties
rule if it
sign
can't be
saying, you
double
know,
checked?
we've
I
acknowledged
don't
our
think you
rights.
can,
I
make sure
think-
the landlord's
Yeah.
giving out.
I think we're kind
Well,
of
tenants
overstepping
don't know
what
that
we're
it's
supposed to be
available.
You know,
doing.
that's
Well,
why
this
I
would
wanted
be
to
a
look into
recommendation
the
to
legality
the
of it.
board to decide if they wanted to make that legislation, because it's not something we can do here. But I don't think that, I think that the best source to actually, one of the sources, I mean, there's numerous places that they can get this, but I think the more, because I think if you're doing a good job as a landlord, your tenants are trying to do that stuff already, and you're doing your very best to give them the information that's in there, and it's the kids that are running around without any information that are having troubles with not knowing how to resolve problems or otherwise.
So one thing that we talked about last time and the time before was, as part of an educational push, that we need to have a table available, at, various
Orientations and
events.
things like that.
Yeah, and also strategic posters. We put cafeteria, bistro here or there. Did you know your rental property has to be registered? Did you know that your landlord has to give you this, and
Yeah, but
this?
they wouldn't know if it's registered or not. There's so many.
Well, we can
No,
tell you,
that-
all they have to do is go to the
I mean,
building
that's
department.
the first
That's the
thing
thing,
I
for more
raised.
information, go to blah, and that's
Parents
why we
do.
need a website with all this stuff.
I think if Valerie does everything on email and she gets it to sign it and link up to this and that, that's her. I don't do that, you don't do that, so we can hand it out, anything we wanna hand out with the lease, you haven't signed the lease in your office, so they initial the lead thing, they initial that they got this.
Exactly.
And look, I'm so happy last month that we did the work on that, because I thought it was great. And it's not a burden to either side, it's good for
One
the
page.
landlord, it's
Yep.
good for the
It's
tenant.
outlining everybody's rights and responsibilities.
Exactly, so it's not a bit, like,
It's not
I couldn't picture
comprehensive.
a landlord saying, I'm not giving that out, I don't want them to know that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
I mean,
it's-
Let's
that's,
get it together first.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and
almost
decide
there.
Where we
Yeah.
want to go.
It's
yeah,
almost
I mean,
there,
there's
but,
documents. Solid.
on the flip side of it, it has all the different contact, all the different things that people might need to contact if there's an issue. So there's,
Additional, further reading type of things?
like, Village Building Inspector, New Paltz Property Association, Attorney General, Division of Housing and Community Rental for New York State. We need to go through and check that the contact info is still good for each one of these things.
So a lot of what we're talking about is kind of like a segue right into this link to the Village of Tivoli. And I
That's a
don't know
big
if you
percent.
opened this and read this, but this is actually as a group can do something like this. I would love to see this incorporated. This is an 8-page document. It's short, it's sweet. It talks about tenants' rights, it talks about landlords' rights, it talks about the village, the noise ordinance, what your heat's supposed to be.
The thing, in Tivoli, are landlords required to hand that out to renters? So the question is then, how does that get to the renter?
I don't know how you can force.
I'm not arguing with you that, I'm just saying.
Well, this would be something that you would put at the chamber. It would Forward that, starting in October, when most college students start looking to rent for the next year, that's a good time because they're not getting inundated in the beginning of the semester when everyone's getting their mess. And if somebody send this link out, I think that's a good start because a lot of the kids who live here or who go to college here tend to stay here after they graduate too. So over the next 3 to 5 years, you could really have some good head.
Who
It
is
is.
renting
Yeah.
locally?
I mean, I'm a current student. They know who's off campus, who's not, who's a commuter. They have all that information.
But
And
Yeah.
they have, so for instance, I'm an off-campus student, so there's an email chain specifically for council. I can be like, hey, let's try to work together and get things rolling. But the couple times I've gone over there, I haven't really been able to get anybody.
I'm having difficulty sending this because for some reason I can't connect to the village hall. Yeah.
Back on the security deposit
Yeah.
law.
So we can
So we
say, we've made progress on this. We need to continue to work on it. Need to combine it with something like the Tivoli resources, but it's under. There we go.
So Robin, if I understand it, you emailing that, Alex is gonna send it out. Are you gonna try and incorporate this renter's handbook from Tivoli as well, or do you
I'll
want
see
help
what I
with
can,
that?
I'd like help with it. I'm gonna be away for 2 weeks, so I would very much like help with
Yeah,
that.
but I've got free time this week. I was going to look at both.
Yeah.
Because after you send it out, I was going to look at both and just kind of pretty much take, switch Tivoli with New Paltz and then try to assimilate what we've already done into that if it's not already.
Yeah,
And
which
then
is-
go.
Make
which
sure
is
that
fine.
what we did last month was.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to take what we already have.
Don't
and try
forget, we
to-
also have like a pamphlet that's already.
There is
Yeah.
one that's
dedicated
already
to
matched.
about
And you had sent that out as well, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
2 months ago or something. Because I'm pretty sure
I sent
saw
out
that.
like 3 different.
Yeah, I've still got that in my inbox too. That's what I was going to do, is try to get everything together and just be
It's in
like,
my
all right, well,
book.
this is stated 3 places. Clearly, this is
Yeah.
something we
Yeah.
want. And then we could have a better working document so everybody put eyes on and work off of next time.
Yeah.
Try to get this done.
I have started, I know we're this is off topic just slightly, but I've started trying to put together what's called a live binder, which is an online, basically notebook, so that we organize all the different things that we have under different tabs, and it can be accessible by different people. So I don't know how far I'll be able to get on it, but hopefully soon I'll be able to get it to a point where
Are we
can.
allowed to congregate on something like that? Online?
Well, as a resource for documents,
Okay.
but not to, I don't think we could do decision
The
making
changes
on
would
it.
have to be made and decided to be
Well,
made.
each
here.
person
Post
would be able
changes
to
could be-
access the document,
Yeah,
make whatever edits they felt would be beneficial, and then bring them to the meeting and we can discuss them, and then
Yeah.
task one person with then updating the document with whatever updates
which is
were
basically the
recommended.
same as like having a Google Doc thing, except that it's organized into different tabs.
Which is nice.
So like all the
Yeah,
agendas would be in one place, and all of the forms would be in one place, and
What
just
is this?
live binder.
And 2 people can work on something together at the same time.
Yes,
Besides the
and
edits
make-
or something like that, because I'm more familiar with Google Docs.
Well, the live binder would direct you to the Google Doc. It would give you the link to the Google Doc, but it's just an organizational way
Oh,
of,
so just kind of like
seeing
like
them.
overlaid over.
Yeah,
Okay, just
yeah.
with edits though, if people were editing it in between
In multiples.
meetings, there'd be
Yeah.
multiple versions of it at the same
no,
time.
it would be,
The live
it would be linking to the Google Doc,
Yeah.
and then you can have 15 people in a Google Doc at the same time and everybody typing
So maybe we
things.
would try not to edit it without talking about it in meetings first, just so it didn't get a little crazy.
I think the best thing to do there, and I know
'Cause,
we're
like,
gonna
you
move
know-
on, is to make sure that in the upper right-hand corner, instead of editing, you're suggesting. And
Okay.
then it tracks all of the things that you type and attaches your name to them.
Yeah.
And so everybody knows who put what in,
Okay.
and then it doesn't get formally added to the document until you approve the suggestion.
Oh, great.
That's cool.
All right,
I just make one comment, I mean, and this overall is good, the handbooks and the pictures and all of that, and what you do, Valerie, is great, but I think could we focus on like exactly what channels we're going to use to get this, because we could have the greatest thing in the world, but if we don't channel, and what I'm learning here, I don't rent to students, not for any particular reason, that's just not, hasn't fallen in, we used to, but they're the ones, and I can see it from being on the planning board, that can be taken advantage of. So I think we really got to figure out how when the student comes to the college, or where do they go to, like you said, they don't even know there's a building inspector.
So if
And
I'm a
Holly,
student and I come
Holly
to student-
Esposito probably knows more about the rentals in New Paltz than anybody else.
Sure. Mhm.
So she would be great if they went in and we give her the document. I was even thinking today, which might be a little far afield, the Chamber of Commerce. They should, that's
No,
when
it's
I
not
read the
far
Tivoli,
afield at all, that's.
the Tivoli thing. The Kiwanis, any of these groups that are here, at least we could let them know about it. But when the kid comes in, how does the kid get this packet of information?
And
So-
we've had a
Be
couple,
quickly educated.
we've had a couple of different suggestions here. And one of them was that the college, upon determining that somebody is going to be an off-campus renter, emails it to them directly. Or that when a landlord rents, that attached to the, and this is the thing, we're not sure how it would be enforceable, that attached to the rental agreement would be this guideline.
Yeah.
And that here's how
But
you do
again,
it.
like Ed said, that's now, is the guy going to do it, the girl
The
going
thing,
to do that.
the thing with the lead documents isn't that, nobody from the government comes around to check if you did those. But if you have a complaint from a tenant, or something happens,
You
you
don't
can
have
say,
that
yes, I
secret
gave this information out, but it's to have this information. And it would be the same thing, it's sort of a self-policing thing, is that me?
Yeah,
That's the
a little scary.
In fairness of time, can we move on?
Yeah.
Once we get this document, then we'll talk about how we disseminate
Yeah.
it.
Okay,
You know.
I have things I'd like to propose, but.
Can I just ask one quick question? What the tenant bill of rights that you have there that we worked on last month, that is a New Paltz thing that New Paltz did at some point. Then we have this, which
That's
is
from
from
the
the
state.
state. Is there anything similar to the Tivoli handbook
I
that
think
New
that's
Paltz
about,
has? That New Paltz has done on its own? Okay.
no, and that's what we need.
No, we do, that's.
Yeah,
that-
that's
that
the
is
document
what-
that
yeah,
she's been
Yeah.
Okay.
sending it.
Yeah.
Okay, that, yes, no, you're right. You're
It's
right.
not it's not as thick and in
I
depth
think
as
it's called like,
Tivoli
it's like
one.
content for, and I forgot
Yeah.
the actual title, but the first couple words in the filing is content
Yeah.
for.
It's like your rights, how to
I'm
not.
gonna
be
ask
Yeah.
us to, I'm gonna ask that we move to the next topic now.
I'll second.
Because we do have limited time, and the village is, the board has expressly asked us to address this issue
Yep.
tonight. So I'd like to make sure that everybody's able to participate. I'm gonna ask if we could open the discussion on proposed legislation for village board recommendations regarding 2-week limit on tenant security returns.
Discussing it?
Yeah, we need,
Yes.
Any feedback?
I don't know, do we need a second and a motion to
Well,
open the
it's just on the
discussion?
agenda.
no, it's on the agenda,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so, yes, please.
Yeah, so I read it, just going right through it. Under section A, number 1, the only thing I would add is outside of normal wear and tear.
I don't think that's one of the things that has changed. So there was only B and C that were the amendments.
Yeah, this is a whole new law.
Was it okay? I thought they were just edits, the 2 edits on the existing law.
No, this is a whole new law.
Okay.
How does that statement read?
right, because there,
Those funds necessary to reimburse the landlord for repairs to the property for damages caused by the tenant or his or her invitees during the tenancy outside of normal wear and tear.
And
That's,
the outside is not in there.
it is not in here. no.
Yeah, that one should be in there.
where are you looking?
I'm under A, number 1.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Agreed.
Then, when you go to B,
Yeah, I'm-
If you don't mind.
that's fine.
when you go to B, when you look at the state law, reasonable in whatever the time is, this isn't clear. Do they have to have it within 14 days? Does it have to be postmarked in 14 days?
Good question.
That's not clear. So I spoke with several landlords. They were asking for 21 days.
I'm gonna make a proposal that we discuss a different perspective about this. One, we have state law that's 30 days, and all of
There is no
it,
state law that's 30 days.
is it a code?
It's not state law, it's 30 days. It's reasonable and customary. And if you look up reasonable and customary,
For return of security deposits, no, it's 30 days in New York State.
I,
It's right in here.
It is 30 days.
Okay, well, in various places it says reasonable and customary.
Yeah.
And if you look up what's reasonable and customary in terms of law, it's 21 to 45 days.
Okay, that,
I think 30 days is ridiculous. 14 days is tight. There was one landlord who expressed, he does his bills, the utilities are in his name,
that's me.
but the students pay. So
Oh.
if they're not on a calendar month and they bill mid-month, they might not know what the total is until 15 days.
But if the security is kept in a separate account,
They're not
It's just
necessarily.
it's from time. I'm just talking about time to get back. So my electric doesn't go from the 1st to the 30th. It's because of when I,
I'd like to finish what I was starting to say. The state law, as far as I know, because that I've read in, but there are multiple places where it says the customary as well, but I've read the law, and that's 30 days. And at this point in time, if the landlord goes over 30 days with with returning the security, the tenant can then go to the court and address the contract and the fact that the landlord hasn't complied with it, which also I was going to bring up the length of time it takes to get utilities back, because I also keep all of my utilities in my name. But the point I wanted to make was, we're talking about, one of the things that I asked that we address last meeting that we had minutes for, was about doing community impact studies on what will happen with proposed legislative changes. And I bring that back to this, because right now, the courts in New York State have a law and they have a process for dealing with people who go outside the law with their contract should say 30 days, and the village doesn't have to pay for any of that. Everybody else in the community who pays property taxes, they're paying for a judge to be there to deal with court night, but they don't have to pay for a lawyer. Small claims court generally deals with it. Our county taxes pay for it if it has to go up to the county, and the county lawyers take care of it. But if we add a process by which the tenants are coming, their securities back in 14 days, and when we negotiate something, or we legislate something that's outside what we already have, that the state is monitoring and the courts are monitoring and contract law is monitoring, then we have to be hiring people who are going to have to research those things. We have to hire the lawyers to enforce.
It's gonna go to local court.
Right,
And so
but
they
the
already
village
know-
lawyer is gonna have to represent it.
Well, the village, it's the village, no, because we're not suing the village of New Paltz.
No, the village is if the village, I went to court last night.
Yeah.
Because the village, somebody at the building department had heard we were using one of our buildings incorrectly, and I had to go to court.
That's separate from security, because that doesn't fall.
It's the same
under-
kind of thing, you're talking about building a code that the lawyers are gonna have to enforce, and that the village is gonna have to do the research and follow through on creating penalties.
But the village lawyer isn't gonna defend that, it's still gonna be the tenant versus the landlord,
think
and
that's a
whether or not the
different
landlord, either those people have.
I
So
don't
the
think-
lawyer, the village lawyer won't be involved in that at all,
If-
unless somebody sues the village
They will.
over that, but that's a separate thing altogether than that particular security
They
deposit
will, and
case.
because this is going to be a village code that will need to be enforced
Well, I mean,
through the
first
village
time that
departments.
passed a law and then somebody tried to sue them, I mean, it happens all the time.
If I might just interject, the mayor wrote this in a way to try and create zero burden on the building department. This is written that if you violate the security deposit legislation, when you are brought to court, then the additional penalty is issued by the judge. So the person, if they're actually willing to take it to court over their deposit, would have been there anyway. The only difference is the landlord's getting hit with an extra fine for not complying with the law.
Who's going to support the tenant in court over this? Don't they have to don't they have to have a lawyer
Small
with them?
claims.
Well, that's up to the tenant.
Yeah, it's optional.
So
We
that's-
can't tell them how to represent themselves.
Now,
Well, that was my first perspective about it, and the second one is what Ed was speaking about. There are quite a few landlords who keep the utilities in their names, that all of those have to get back to us and then have to be disseminated out to the tenants.
14 days, I am just getting some of those utility bills back.
I'm sorry, I asked this before, I still don't understand. If the security deposit is put into a separate bank account at
It
this.
isn't.
It's supposed to be.
It's
Not
supposed
unless
to
you
be.
have 5 units or
No,
more in a
No, it's
building.
supposed to be for every
It's always
single.
supposed to be
supposed to be.
separate, it's just
It's always
there's
supposed to be
interest.
separate.
Yup.
You're supposed to pay interest if you have
Yup.
6 units or more. But
Well,
I just want to, I'm still having a problem. When I look at the tenant's right guide put out by the Attorney General, the landlord must return security deposit less any lawful deductions to the tenant at the end of the lease or within a reasonable time thereafter, whether or not the tenant asks for the return.
Right,
I didn't see anywhere where it says 30 days, but whether it's 30 days or not, what I was going to suggest is 21 days. 14 days is tight. That doesn't prevent a landlord from returning it earlier.
I'm not sure why 14 days is tight if it's in a separate, if all of the security deposits are in a.
I'm the landlord, and I have the electric in my name and whatever else. But you're gonna pay for that. It gets split up between 5 people living in the house, right? But because my meters don't close at the end of the month, it closes on, say, the 10th of the month.
But that has nothing to do with the security deposit.
Yes, because
Yes,
you
it
take
does,
the
because
electricity bill
when-
out.
Just come
that's what
out.
they do with the last, with the last payment, they withhold it from the security deposit.
I don't,
I don't think
that. I do it
that's how
differently.
that's supposed to be done. I mean, maybe it is how it's done customarily,
Well,
but I
they
thought
should
that the
pay the
security.
electric bill, but if they don't, he has the security.
That's the
bill.
difference.
He's
I thought
gonna, he's
that-
gonna hold the security deposit until everything has been paid. So they don't have to take it out of security deposit. They can sit there and say, your share of the expenses was $61. You give me a check for $61, I give you your full rent back, or your full security deposit back. But if I don't get that, I withhold that and send you the difference. That's the point. But the law itself, so it says, later than 14 calendar days. That to me, 14 days.
I think most things are, the rule is that it has to be postmarked.
Yeah, I would
That's-
say
that's
that
not
needs
how-
to be
That's not how
clarified.
the law reads, that's my point.
Well, maybe it's just assumed, because in any case, tax returns, anything that you mail out is
Yeah,
postmarked.
let's
No,
not leave
tax
room for
returns.
Well, that's
Usually
not
they
true
have
actually either,
postmark.
because credit card bills and stuff like that, it's when they want to tell
They
you they
decide,
got
hey, yeah, we
Yeah,
actually
no,
got
I
it.
explained that.
So, no,
So-
you're right, we need to clarify,
Yeah.
So-
first of all, the date, and second of all, whether it's postmarked or whether it's
Yeah.
received.
Correct.
I agree with both those
Then,
clarifications.
then the next said penalty.
And now,
can I
yes,
go back to that, please?
for it to be,
Yes, another problem. I just sent out my my move outs for May 25th. I sent out, it's in June, the securities to the tenants and received notification from two of them who had certified things that got lost in White Plains who have still not gotten their securities. This is something now that unlandlord was the
Now,
post
if you have,
office.
now if you have a certified letter, you have your certified
Yeah, your
receipt,
receipt.
you're covered.
yeah.
But not every landlord sends everything.
That's just being.
That's on.
I think 14 days is just really,
I think
you brought up how some of the landlords do it, and I myself find it, I don't like the idea of taking someone's security, so I keep the utilities in my name, prepay it, and then they get back whatever the balance is at the end of the year. So they generally get back more than their security, and that looks great. So I'm not taking the money out of the utility money out of the security money. They've actually prepaid for them based on the general usage for that house. But it does take me up to 21 days or more sometimes to get all of those bills plus repairs done. I've had some I give my tenants houses that the families would want to live in. And when I've had a floor that's just been destroyed, and I have to get the guy in to refinish a floor that was finished the week before the people moved in,
Yeah, but
It took a while.
this is the 14 days that's in here as if there's no issues.
Right.
but then it doesn't mean I have to communicate with them
Or
twice.
if there are issues.
Well,
Yeah,
listen,
tell you not to say
in
if
14 or
there's an issue.
21 days, you know what the issues are.
Right.
Would it be helpful, and I'm sorry to interject here, but it would be helpful if we added verbiage that said, you're required within X amount of days to either provide security or indicate what the holdup is, such as I have an electric bill that I haven't received yet, and I need to know that, you know, what to
Okay.
deduct.
I mean, that's,
You know what,
that's pretty
that's-
much what it says. It says, you know, said reimbursement or itemized statement detailing reasons for all or a portion of the security deposit being withheld. So you could send a letter within
Right.
14 days saying, hey, the, you know, the electric bill hasn't come in yet. You know, everything else looks good. We're just waiting on that. Based on usage, it looks like it might be $100 or so.
You can't-
Just
yeah.
a heads up.
You can't read item B unless you read item A. Item A clarifies the conditions under which item B qualifies. So item B says 14 days. Item A says these are the situations where a tenant doesn't get the security deposit back, which include those funds necessary to reimburse the landlord for repairs to the property for damages caused by the tenant or his or her invitees during their tenancy, and I think that's where we're adding the beyond usual and customary. 2, unpaid rent. 3, unpaid utilities. It said 4, expenses associated with lawful eviction process. And the landlord shall provide the tenant with an itemized statement detailing the application of all or a portion of the security deposit for any of the items set forth in this subsection. So, subsection A is saying these are the reasons why you would not have to send things back within 14 days, because you send a notification within 14 days. Item B is saying if none of those things apply and all's clear, then the rent needs to go back in 14, or yeah, the security deposit needs to go back in 14
Or
days.
notification.
I don't
May I
care
ask
1421, I just.
Does it
think
define in
has to
there
be
whether or
clarified
not it has to be by
postmark. I think
email or
postmark is good.
postal mail
She
or,
wanted to do it.
I mean,
I
obviously
don't
you want a
see-
document out of it.
It doesn't in those 2 sections.
I think in the section A is the place where it's requiring a notification. I would like that somewhere to stipulate that that
The
notification
means
can be
of
by
notification.
email.
Well, I mean, really, it should be by certified mail. That's the general. That's the general.
That's a lot of money and
Emails
time.
are
Well,
legal
is it-
documents, aren't they?
Listen,
From a landlord
you can
perspective,
send-
is it better to tell a landlord
Yes.
exactly how they need to notify, or is it better to give them the flexibility to email or do it via paper or however?
I think it's
they're
not
more
trying to limit the
comfortable with?
landlord, I
I
think
think
it's trying to
certified mail is a
educate
burden,
both
and I
sides.
think if it was email, I think that you can request.
I'm very
a
happy to do
receipt.
it by email.
I think email is fine.
The problem is,
You
can
can
you
send the email letting them know that you're withholding for whatever reasons, but in order to send the check, there's no way to prove that you sent the check
The
through
check
email.
needs to be certified
Check-
mail, I totally agree. But an email notifying why you're not doing it, you really need to have return receipt on the email. You need to put, you know,
Right, right.
signify,
Make sure that-
notify
that's
me
what I
when
was
somebody
thinking,
opens
just-
this.
That they
Um,
sort.
Say that again,
and-
please?
and-
You need to have return receipt on the email, so it notifies you when somebody opens that email.
I don't think we really have to put all that in language. I mean,
No, but
No,
There's
but
no
the
reason-
concerns
that
are the
it's
kind
not
of
in
things that I
language
can
is
bring to the
important.
lawyer and say, hey, these are the concerns, is there a way we can tighten the verbiage?
Exactly.
But I
Yeah,
think
that's
given,
what legislation
given those
exactly.
exemptions in section A, I think that section B stands.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
14
so.
days
You know, I-
is reasonable.
I agree with the way you're interpreting it, but I think maybe we can write it just so that way there's just,
So if we
postmark
say,
within 14 days.
Postmark
Yeah.
14 days.
Yes.
Put in however you want to
So-
send them
Right,
a
it just-
notification that you're not sending them back, but their security right away, that you have issues you must deal with, I think.
so
add
starting
email.
section B, beginning section B, it should say absent any exemptions as itemized in section A, said reimbursement or itemized statement, blah, 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 shall occur no later, shall than 14 calendar days following the date the tenant surrenders possession of the lease space.
Right, so if you don't get your electric bill, what are you gonna just tell them, listen, I haven't got it yet?
I'm gonna ask for one other consideration for, 21 days I think is good. And I would like to bring up the fact that for 5 to 7 solid days after those tenants move out, leaving or one house leaving, turning over 50 tenants. For that 7 solid fixing, gathering, and so 21 days gives us 7 days to fix and 14 days to reply. I
But
think that that's
if you-
more fair
That's
to the
just
landlords.
absurd.
How long does it take you to figure out, let's say you've got 50 tenants, how long does it take you to figure out how much work you're going to need to do on all of the properties?
Sometimes not until you start tearing it apart. We've got
But if you have to do repairs, the 14 days is for you to notify the tenant that there are issues that need to be resolved.
Which you'll know.
Right.
You'll
And
know
after-
those within 14 days. You may
Yes.
not have it fixed within 14 days.
I understand that.
But that gives you the flexibility, it gives you the time that you need.
I'm having palpitations every time I hear 14 days. 21, I can start to breathe again.
But,
I just feel that, I feel,
But if there is anything that needs to be fixed, that's the exemption to the 14 days.
Correct.
That's when you get that
right, but
extended
at
time.
7 days, what I've got is a notebook full of chicken scratch to write.
Right, but if
that-
you have a tenant who left the place as nice as when they got it in, they should be entitled to their security back. in
Yes,
14
and they get
days.
it back.
You know, you've had apartments where you walk in and you're like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And you've had apartments where, oh my God, where's the for sale sign? I'm not doing this in 30 years.
But no, so, in those apartments where you walk back in and you're like, holy moly, I want 17 more of these tenants, please. How often do you uncover something that wasn't visible, that was a big
Certainly
repair
nothing
issue?
major.
Okay, so that
You only-
reinforces that.
I have 2 apartments, they're not moving into the end of August. All right, I did my go around,
Mhm.
security deposits back. I won't know something is majorly wrong until the new tenants move
Right.
in. But that's, unfortunately, that's one of the risks you take when you're a landlord.
Right.
And, you know, I can't hold
No,
security
and you
for 3
read it
months.
because you didn't notice it when they
Well,
left.
listen, I personally don't have an issue with 14 days, assuming that they left everything nice. There's enough language in here that if anything needs to be done,
Mhm.
as long as you notify them within 14 days,
Good.
you're fine. So
It's
I would
reasonable.
like the 21 days,
Right.
but I think that that's,
I can,
it's
I can accede to the fact that I can notify them by email, because that
Mm-hmm.
can be done rapidly and quickly. They're in my computer, bang, you've got these things going on, and you're gonna need to wait. And then at the same time, the 30 people who didn't need to wait, whoosh, it's
Yep.
gone.
Yeah.
Or, you know, your electric bill isn't in yet, and I wanna make sure that you, again, only pay exactly what you used, and you might have to wait for extra.
Which is
So-
up
so
there in
we're
that
doing-
item A,
we're
unpaid
doing 14
utilities.
days,
Yeah.
postmark 14 days, C. I can't wait to hear C. The penalty.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
landlord's
Tim
penalty.
suggested $10 a day, which I think is a joke.
Yeah.
I think
A
that's,
joke in which
No, it's-
direction?
I think it's too
I-
low.
I think
Yeah,
it's
way
way too low.
Yeah, it's not enough
I'll
of a
tell you, I
penalty.
already emailed the lawyer and said, how can we put more teeth in just $10 a day?
I would like to see it
25.
personally, and I'd like to see it as a
And a
percentage.
pony.
I actually was thinking the same thing earlier, it should be a percentage of the
It
rent.
should be a percentage.
Percentage.
Listen, call it 25%. If you don't do it after 14 days, the next 7 days, it's 25% of the security deposit.
Oh, wow.
I like that.
For each additional day.
Right.
It
So-
doesn't go from
25%
10
each.
to 20 the next day to 30 the next day. It's $10 one day, $10 the next
Yeah,
day.
I hear you, but that's not the same thing as a percentage across the 7.
When you say a percentage
I'd
of
say, I
Oh,
as a
so every
landlord.
day.
No. I as a landlord, if I don't notify the tenant within the 14 days, I now have a week. But I at 25%.
So
My
every
penalty
week
should
would
be
be
25%, exactly.
25% of what?
Security deposit.
Oh, I disagree with that.
I
And
figured
the
you
reason
would.
why isn't because I don't return securities. The reason why is because once you start getting into those percentages, well, I'll let this discussion continue. I have to think about what I'm thinking of.
I mean, it's meant to be.
Punitive, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, not even. I think it's actually meant to be more proactive than that.
Yeah,
I think
well,
it's meant
yeah.
to be like a dissuasive, like, see what'll happen if you unjustifiably deny a security deposit. You know, and I think it was kind of where Celeste
Or
was
delay
trying
a
to go with
security
like the
deposit,
treble
yeah.
damages and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. I think this basically accomplishes that same goal
Mhm.
as like the treble damages.
Yeah.
The whole point of that is to make it more severe of a penalty, and I
Mhm.
think this accomplishes that. But
Right.
again, it's only if the landlord doesn't follow
Yeah.
what they're
Oh,
supposed to do.
I realize why I didn't think about, if you have a set rate, it's gonna cost you $50 a day if you don't return the security. You go 10 days, you've got $500.
Correct.
But if you had $1,000 security and it's 5 days in, you've lost $150, 10 days in, it's still $250, how does that make the person get it done?
I see what you're saying.
Every So you waited 6 weeks to return it? You gotta return double?
Mhm. I think
But
that's
all
it.
they have to do is saying, hey,
Yeah,
there's
I'm
some
optimistic
issues.
about that.
It's just as simple as an email.
And that's all they have to do,
Mhm.
you know, to.
You wanna give this thing some
And that's
teeth,
incentive.
that's how you do it.
Yeah,
You wanna force landlords to return, that's how you do it.
that's more teeth than I was thinking.
But I think,
Like that.
Ed, just to put, if I'm in this position, and again, Valerie probably has more experience than all of us here at the table, I'm gonna send this email out within 14 days and say, there's some issues that I have to address. And I'm just gonna buy time.
Well, you have to address them specifically.
I'll address them specific.
That's
But
fine.
you also have to be.
But I'll say, you know, come on, I'm just listening to what you're saying, and again, I think the thrust here is to go after these landlords who aren't doing the right thing. And I'm trying to, these guys are pretty clever, and I don't think all of this penalty and all of this and 21 days versus 14 is really gonna affect them.
I see it.
If they're being
Request some
devious,
sort of
if they're
documentation,
being
like a
devious, they'll
photograph.
find a way.
I have to tell you, there's something that, Bryant and I had a conversation yesterday with Richie Steffens. I happened to go in there to talk to him about the planning board meeting the night before, and Richie was there. And one of the things we were talking about was some of the really, really, really bad housing that's bursting up all over town right
Yeah.
now. And as much as I am opposed to change, I like the way I do things, I also am seriously encouraging change to prevent that. And if this can do that, I can make this work. Because I think that making sure that housing doesn't creep over the whole thing and dilute the industry to the point that it becomes, there's so much supply. Good housing can't make enough money to support itself, then we've got neighborhoods collapsing.
Yep.
And when I talk about like being committed to my neighborhood, things like
Well,
that.
you're talking about the physical appearance.
Yeah,
Everything.
Everything.
No,
Everything is related to that and
Yeah, but
the
I'm
quality
saying
of
you
the
could have a
neighborhood.
crappy looking house and the guy still returns your security. I'm 100% with you, because I'm and garbage.
Right.
All right, but let's get back.
Yeah, that's the point
But
though.
I
the
think
question-
to your point,
the
I think
question
it's
was-
important
Yeah.
to make sure that we have something in here that says people that are going out of their way
I'm
to
sorry.
stalling without any actual evidence at the end of the process.
Mhm.
We need to have some sort of a device in
It's
the
there.
legislation.
And that's
Section
why.
There.
A. Or,
Section A has all the answers.
Section A, Section A, subset 4, right up there. The landlord shall provide the tenants with an itemized statement detailing the application of all or a portion of the security deposit for any of the items set forth in this
And
subsection.
how do you do that with the electric bill?
You say, here's the
Yeah.
we're still waiting.
I mean,
on
they're
this.
gonna,
As long as you are the key to this is communication.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, this isn't an issue for any of us sitting at the table. Right, we're here because for all the landlords out there who don't care. And you know who this is gonna bite the most? Who aren't legally landlords.
Yes.
Who aren't registered with the
Yeah.
village.
That's
Because you know what's gonna happen? Who are in the landlords who aren't paying attention to any of this, one of these smart kids is gonna read that security deposit back. Or I'm entitled to $250. Celeste will represent him at the,
Yeah.
at court. And guess what? You know what's gonna happen? Some of these illegal housing that's going on, it's not gonna be legal.
As soon as their name gets out there, you know, like to the town or whatever, like through this process, I mean, that's pretty much it, you know.
Listen, protect the landlords who are
Exactly.
doing the right thing, who need to do repairs, at least how I read it.
I don't
I
think
agree.
21 days, only because the guy then, again, I'm just, might say, like I said back to you, you know, the landlord might not. Then if there is damage, he has to take a look at it, could be 2 weeks before. I think your 21 days is
But
long.
Well,
if there
the landlord-
is notification,
At that point,
and then
anybody
you
would be
follow up
coming
with
in.
clarification on the
Damage,
details.
we're estimating
But
the
actually,
cost.
you gotta be
Can I-
they
can I-
just moving out.
I have to
Yeah.
remind everybody that we're not just, I agree with you here on this. And I'm not saying that because I want the 21 days, because I can make the 14 work if it happens.
Yeah.
But not, we always seem, because there's such a
huge proportion of the rentals in New Paltz are students. We tend to make our conversations very focused on protecting the younger students. We have to understand that are non-student rentals, and that those landlords need to be heard in this discussion as to how they're doing things, because I have a rapid fire system because I have to.
Same tenants year after year after year.
I
after
do
year,
now, but in
all the
some of them,
time.
but not like most people who have long-term tenants who may do long-term kinds of damage, and I really would like to hear what you have to say, how
Well,
that
you
might work
can,
differently.
and I'll tell you a quick one, so you know where I'm coming. We had one break the lease this month, nice young couple, she became pregnant and had a lot of high blood pressure. They broke the lease. When you break your lease, under our terms, you don't get your security.
And that's
Okay.
in here.
Huh?
That's in here.
Yeah, I'm just saying. My wife gave them the security as they were leaving the apartment. That's how, and I'm not saying that I have a halo, but I'm saying to you, I'm looking at it how we do it, then I think of you with the students who we have had. I just think 14 days is too short of a window. You'd have to give, and what's the big deal? I mean, the kid can't wait another 7
A lot
days.
Well,
of these
you
kids
know,
are
I-
international, a
you
lot
know,
of these kids.
Some of these kids can, and here, I rented to some Turkish students, and this is some of the things that you have to think about. The Turkish students, I'm not mailing something to Turkey.
Yeah.
You know, when they moved in, you know what they did? They paid for the whole semester up front. They gave me the security deposit, they gave me everything. The day they moved out, I went there, we went through the apartment, they did some things that they didn't get their security deposit back, and I gave them the balance. We
Right.
agreed to it. But we have a lot of international students who are here, and those are the ones who are being taken advantage of, not by anybody
yeah.
here,
Yeah.
but around. You know, I can't believe that I'm arguing for the 14 days as a landlord, but when you read the language,
It's an egg.
if there are issues, listen, when you sat there and you said, well, as a landlord, I might not get there for 7 days. But that shouldn't be on the renter if it takes you 7 days to get there. What we're doing is a business.
Also,
That's right.
as a non-student, but still young and hip, like,
Okay.
it's, the thing is, like, you know, when I move out, I'm not going to mom's house. Like, I'm going to another apartment,
Yeah.
who's also going to want
Security.
money up front. So like,
Yeah.
so, you know, even 14 days is burdensome, because I'm somehow, before I moved out, move out with all the expenses that can be accrued just in moving, because you're so busy, you know, eating, I don't know, like pizza and bagels every day, which, you know, as cheap as pizza and bagels are, and delicious, it adds up when you're not like cooking at home. End up having to shell out some money, maybe you're paying your friends gas money because they're helping you move, whatever. So, you know, you have to like save up to like move out.
Yeah, it's true.
And getting
That's life.
and getting your money, and no, you know, and even 14 is a stretch, but like it's when you're moving from one place to another, especially if you're actually moving towns, changing jobs, whatever, that extra like week or 2 or 3
That'll break.
2 weeks, I think. So that extra 2 weeks could actually be really super helpful for people moving from one apartment into another.
And even knowing
you know?
having the clarity of knowing, yes, I'm getting my
Yeah,
deposit
peace
back,
of mind.
or no, I'm not getting my deposit back.
Well, also
Quickly
in,
helps.
in regards to that, like let's say you're moving to a new place, but you're still waiting for your deposit. If you get either certified mail or a nice email from your former landlord saying, hey, this is what you're getting back from me, you could then show that to your new landlord, be like, hey, I'm getting my deposit back. This shows that I'm a good tenant, and that like that kind of thing. So it also really helps the renters out like that.
When you look at the renter's handbook from Tivoli, there's also some language in there about the apartment being clean. So there's some language in here. I mean, listen, when you know that the apartment's not clean, you know that. You're withholding $100 easily to do that.
Right.
All this, you're gonna know within, I just think the
I go
14
through and
days.
do a walkthrough as
If,
well.
if
Yeah.
the tenants haven't done anything wrong, it's easy to get the check back. in
Yeah, you should
14
know
days.
within a
That's-
walkthrough.
And if there's the
Lovely.
issue about the utilities,
That's
that's
in
one of
there.
the exceptions in section
But
A, and
that's-
so you notify them that you're not gonna be getting this back until I settle the utilities. And,
But then that's how you educate the landlords to sit down with the tenants when they move in, when you're doing your checklist, and here's the handbook.
Mhm.
I have to give you your security deposit back within 14 days, unless I'm done, and then I have time to get it fixed. So if you want your security deposit back, the apartment has to be moved in.
Right.
The refrigerator's gotta be empty, all these different things. Yes, it's putting some onus on us as landlords, putting some back on the tenant.
Because the first thing I do when people move out is check, go to every
Of course.
apartment with my notebook, because I need to know who to hire, who to send,
Of course.
when to schedule it. That's all written out the day after everybody's moved out. It's very easy to decide, well, that one's gonna take a while, and then send that notice out right then and there.
In fact, as Ed said, it's a job, so therefore the excuse of, oh, I couldn't get there for 7 days is very lame, because, and you're very foolish too, because you need to be there the day that the kids are, I say kids because I'm students, but you need to be there the day that people are moving out to
do
keep
the walkthrough.
them motivated and, see what's going on and say, well, this isn't good enough, clean that up. Because guess what? They move out, maybe they'll leave the keys on the counter, they're gone, you can't get them back to clean up something, so then you have a big rigmarole that, you don't know what to
Not to
do
mention,
with
if
stuff.
the house is vacant for a week, you never know, somebody else might go in there and completely destroy the place, and now the
Right.
tenant's
Yeah.
liable.
To
for
not be
somebody
there
else's
the
thing.
day they are leaving is very, very, very foolish.
Yeah,
Very wrong.
landlords who don't go and change the locks the day that the tenants move out. I don't know where it says in New York State that it's 30. Reasonable and customary. Reasonable and customary says 21 to 40. We have such a high turnover in New Paltz, in rentals. And again, you and I have very specific. The largest renter in New Paltz, their policy is they return their security deposit within 14 days. I said, how is it? Is it a burden? No, it's not. Because they go through their apartments once a month to check to make sure the railings are all tight and everything's done. They know what's going on beforehand.
Yeah, I would kind of do that.
I go and pick up my rent every month. I ask them not to mail it. I ask them to collect it, and I'll come and I'll see them. And then that gives me an opportunity to just make sure everything is good in the apartment. Make sure that the smoke alarms, the batteries aren't out because they're burning chicken cutlets. So, I mean, yeah, for me, the 14 days seems reasonable in light of everything that's in A.
Right.
Because it gives us all, it gives the landlord an out if they need it. So, are we done on the 14 versus 21
My
days?
biggest issue, which was that it would be a burden for the taxpayers to enforce.
Yeah,
So
that's not really.
So that was my big deal,
so,
actually.
and did we say the percentage?
Before you do that, I'm about to run. Are we like voting on any of this now to send back to the board, or?
I'm writing down all the feedback that everybody's
Okay.
saying, and I'm gonna bring it back to the board, and then we'll see
Okay.
what comes.
So I just wanted to before I took off.
Any other feedback?
No, I think 2 weeks is great, and I think 25% weekly has some really nice teeth to it. So I think that's awesome.
Think of while you're on the plane or you're traveling, shoot an email.
I very well
include
may.
Where are
the
you going?
conversation.
I
My dad's sick. I'm gonna visit him in Detroit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's gonna be alright. I just haven't seen him in a while.
Oh, okay.
He's feeling ill, so I'm like field trip.
And here's
He's coming back.
Awesome.
A good
Thank you,
trip.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I almost felt this like obligation to applaud for some weird reason. Like, oh yeah. Like, I don't know why.
Alright.
Wrong
Just
answer.
Yes.
Young and hip.
Young and hip, right?
So, what's everyone's thoughts on the penalty? Do you want to do 25% a week? You want to do 15% a
Explain to
week?
me how the 25% a week works again. I mean, like, if,
What?
we've got 14 days. Day 15, if the notification hasn't gone out, the landlord owes an additional 25%.
Correct.
Day 21, the notification goes out, the landlord still is only being penalized an additional 25%.
For a total of 50.
Why?
May 21.
Every week.
Every
Every 7
Every
days.
week is
Still-
another 25%.
Listen to what I said, though. If it's 14 days, day 15, they start to owe the 25%.
Correct.
Day 21 is the end of that third
Correct.
week,
Still
so it's still
25%.
25%.
Correct.
Day 16, I'm sorry, day 22,
22 is 50.
they're at 50.
Correct. What I think would give this thing some teeth.
Yeah.
I don't think a dollar amount per,
I
you know,
see
if
what
I
you're
have $1,000 security deposit and you're gonna penalize me $10 a day,
Yeah.
That's what I said.
I hear what you're saying, I'm just thinking that any landlord is going to look at that and say, oh, I missed the deadline, I can wait another week before I need to do that.
Well, you know what, they're gonna get an extra $250 if it's $1,000, so.
And
That's
especially
a
if you
big
pair it
number.
with education, that students know that they have this.
That's
You
the
have the
trick.
ability to make money if somebody's screwing you over. That's the kind of thing that's gonna catch like wildfire on social media, and students are gonna talk about it when
Yeah.
they talk to their friends and they hear about their problems, like, you know you can get 25% of your
I mean,
deposit back,
all the
right?
landlords here, you guys all have lawyers to
They're-
help advise you with what you can do.
No.
Or you, many of you have
Oh, I can
enlisted the
guarantee
aid
very
of
few
lawyers.
of us.
That
Take
was
the
an
money
issue that, remember,
to
I had an
pay a
incident
lawyer
about when
to
that was
do
bandied
something.
about, by this one right here, that we had lawyers on retainer, so
No.
we didn't care if we
I
paid
didn't say
for it.
You did,
I
I watched it on TV.
No, what was,
Jeez.
what did I say?
It was probably
Well,
different.
that's funny, because somebody else thought it was something they said that you were
No,
upset about.
Celeste was here, or just right after Celeste
It was the
here,
night
and
Celeste
it
was
was about
here.
the trouble damages and going
Yeah.
the threshold of small claims court, and you said, well, it didn't bother the landlords because they just have lawyers on retainer anyway, so it's not a
I might have
hazard.
been being
And I wanted to leap
Yeah,
across the.
No,
Thank you.
because I,
Okay,
I-
chance.
so I have been disabused of that notion now, I was led astray by Amanda.
Yeah,
It's all her
all right. No,
fault.
I didn't
So,
say that.
the language that we have.
I'm
in
like,
the
I have
handbook,
like 5 lawyers, I don't
We
know.
really, the language that's in the handbook should also include that renters should make sure that their landlords know what address to mail
Well,
the
that's an
security
issue.
deposit.
I think that's in that
I require
two-page
them to
thing.
give me the self-addressed stamped envelope because at the end, with their keys, with their parking pass, they
I
have
have
to.
two
Right,
of mine,
have
I
to
know
But
I
that's,
call them and
that's,
ask
that's
where
such a
the
challenge
security.
to do. I do it via text, you know, because last year, during the course of the year, the parents moved. A lot of mine, I'm mailing the security deposit to the parents,
Yes.
but the parents
Yeah.
moved, and, you know,
Yeah.
they're asking me 3 weeks later, where's my check?
Yeah.
You know, because the person who
But
got
that's
the
on
check didn't say return to sender, they just throw it out.
But that's on them, that's not
Well,
on
yeah.
on
They
the
call
landlord,
up,
that's,
they
But that's to the
say
point
that,
of me as a
let's-
landlord making sure I send everything certified now.
yes.
Well, how would
I
I
was
know
just
that?
supposed to.
I'm not even gonna do it, I'm now gonna do
The fir-
Venmo.
yeah,
I'm
when
gonna
I
do
do my-
Venmo or whatever, I can send it directly.
When I do that first day check and walk through, every envelope I don't have, they get an email, I don't have a self-addressed stamped envelope, I don't know what address to send your security to, please text it or email it to me. So if I didn't get one, I'd still
Right,
request
but
it.
that's how you do it.
Right.
We're trying to do this for so many other people who don't
Well,
have
I
a
like to
system
say,
in
well, good
place.
ideas work, maybe people
Is
will
there
find it
anything-
helpful.
Is there anything prohibiting a landlord from returning a security deposit via, say, PayPal?
Well, that's what I just said.
Is that what
That's
Venmo is?
That's what
Yeah,
I
okay.
would do going forward.
Yeah, because that,
What's your email address? I'm gonna send you it electronically. Now I'm done.
But if
And
they
they're
don't have, do they have to have PayPal to receive it or no?
It's a
If
free
you don't,
service.
if they don't, I would send a check out.
Right.
But most people, if you sit there and tell me
PayPal is just-
that I can get my security deposit back in 3 days if I have that, or
Yeah,
2
yeah,
weeks if I don't,
Send
guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna get a,
yeah, no, PayPal, it just connects to your email account, and all you do is you tell it what bank account to deposit it into.
I have a,
I,
And you're gonna
Yeah.
have your
Let's-
email.
but
I
let's
used to have a
remember-
PayPal, and I can't have one anymore because somebody stole my identity.
but whatever, that's
Yeah.
something,
Anyway,
that's
so no,
something that
yeah,
the
that's what I
landlords
was
can
wondering.
work with.
Yeah.
Chase is really good for that too, because every kid seems to have Chase. I opened a Chase account just to
Oh,
take
Chase.
deposits and send securities back.
They do
So,
a really big promo.
I just wanna stay
beginning of the year.
focused on where we
Yeah.
are. So are we good with the percentages?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes?
Yes.
That was, when I read it, I mean, everything else looked good. D is, I'm sorry, D is interesting.
In the event that the landlord fails to comply with this section and the tenant is compelled to seek a court order to obtain a refund of all or a portion of the security deposit, the tenant shall be entitled reimbursement of reasonable costs and attorney's fees upon a finding by the court in his or her favor. The tenant shall be responsible for the landlord's reasonable costs and attorney's fees in the event that the court finds that all or a portion of the security deposit was lawfully retained. So, yeah, whoever wins, gets the fees paid.
Yeah, but for me, there would be, when you're withholding security deposit, if I withhold it for 4 different reasons, and you go into court and you were right on 3 of them, I was right on 1 of them, it doesn't really say.
Oh, it says the court finds that all or a portion of the security deposit was lawfully retained.
Well, wouldn't that be up to the judge though?
I don't know, that's
No.
why it's not, to me, it's not clear. It's
But
kind
it's
of,
all up to a judge, like whether or not you get the security
Yeah, but it's-
back or how much of it, that's all up to the judge.
But this
not
doesn't this doesn't prohibit the judge from allowing, let's say, the landlord, I leave the place a shambles, you
I withhold all of it, but you should,
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just don't think that that's as clear as it could.
That says, the winner gets it, the winner gets it. If there's no clear winner, you need to decide.
Well, there could be, I could win on 50%. We're
Now-
responsible for our own attorney's fees, I don't know.
Some of
I just don't know
this
how it,
might be, some of this looks kind of familiar, and I feel like they might be part of New York State law as far as the whole,
it is.
the reasonable cost of attorney's fees thing. So we can't pass any legislation that contradicts state law.
Well, we're not doing anything, the village board is.
Well, right, well, I guess
Well,
we as in
we're all
the
on the
village
same
of New
page here.
Paltz, yeah.
Well, who's bringing this back to them? You are. So,
So
if
make
you
the
can
lawyer
clarify.
I just didn't think D was clear enough.
yeah,
Yeah,
It
yeah.
may
Part-
be.
No.
about partial judgments. In the case of a partial judgment, what portion of the attorney's fees or the court fees get
Right, you know, I see what you're
It's-
saying. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take everything, I'm gonna write it up, I'm gonna send it to the board just so they have it in advance without actually discussing it, but just giving them the information. And I'm gonna copy everyone here in case I misinterpret anything or anyone feels I left anything out. That way everyone has a chance to add it in. And then the board will go through it. I do think D gives the judge the discretion in that situation
To decide who's paying for
to
what.
decide, you know, because if it's the same landlord that's coming back, that's going out of their way to send a letter right away that says, sorry, I have to figure it out
It's
every
very
14
clear
days,
that
and they
it's
see.
a finding by the court.
in severability, in section C, it does refer to, is this what you were looking to?
I mean, no matter what this law says, I mean, that's how it works. Like the judge just, that's how
Right.
our legal system works. The judge gets to decide. There's no jury. So, you know, but it would be good for the law to be more clear on that so people reading
Right.
who don't
I have this
necessarily
actually in my
understand the legal
notes,
system
so
would understand.
My guess is what this law is gonna do is the judge is gonna wind up seeing the same landlord time and time again. And if the landlord doesn't get his act together, the landlord's gonna be paying for a lot of people's attorneys fees.
Yes.
And I think that's what I think that's what the village
I think we're
board
gonna
is.
see a lot of rental properties going up for sale in the next couple of years once this gets enacted.
Well, I think you're already seeing that
Yeah.
for various reasons, but the fact of the matter is, this law isn't gonna affect 80% of the landlords, it's gonna be the 20% of the landlords who, A, are
But-
less than,
But aren't 20% of the
polite.
landlords a little
And the illegal.
overextended in what
This is
they're
gonna,
doing?
this is gonna hurt the illegal landlords.
This is, which is what has been my focus for goals for this, so because the communities.
For years.
The more we're talking about, the more I like it.
All the times that laws were brought up and they were so abusive. You know, we're the ones doing it right. And yet, we're the ones that are getting focused on because we're visible.
Right.
You know, the ones under the radar and in the shadows, well, they're doing it wrong, but they're not.
But this will push them out of the shadows.
Yeah.
This will flick the light on them.
If the students know about it and.
Right.
Well, that's
and
The students will
that's
know
good.
about
That's
it.
That
the
financial
education
motivation
piece.
is gonna make
Oh,
this
yeah.
spread like wildfire.
We're gonna like tweet it and then our friends are gonna like retweet it.
And they're gonna say, oh my God.
On the flip side, there will be some people who try to say, well, I never got it.
Yeah.
And the landlord's gonna have it, and the landlord's gonna show up with an attorney, and that tenant who tried pulling the wool over is now gonna have to pay for that attorney.
No,
So
this, I would have really
that's
liked
where the
this.
checks and
There's
balances
scoundrels
are.
on both sides, and this is gonna bring all the scoundrels out of the.
Listen, this is making more work for the landlords, but in actuality, it's
The
really how it
good
should be.
landlords, it's supporting them because it's getting the
This
filthy
would be-
competition out of
Yes.
the way.
Someday a real rain will come and. Sorry.
Okay,
excited about to see the
So we
premiere.
killed
No,
that.
it's Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro.
Okay.
Sorry, we're
Sorry.
stuck.
Moving on.
But wait, sorry, just one thing, about this, I think the fact that there are the potential of covering the others' legal fees, et cetera, will be dissuasive as far as like people bringing frivolous cases where they're tenants
Yeah,
who know they messed everything up, from trying to get it back anyway, and vice versa.
if you
So-
lose, you're going to have
Right,
to do
you might have
this.
to, yeah, so like,
But don't you think there should be some clarification of what happens in that instance, where you have.
That's up to the judge.
You know, it's not a clear winner,
Well, that's what the attorney's gonna
you're
figure
gonna
out.
figure it out.
That's not for us, I mean, it's,
We leave
just for
that,
me, it
Yeah,
wasn't
we'll just
clear.
get the big bucks.
we leave that in the hands of the more competent wizards.
Yeah.
All right, so
The way that's written,
Lawyers
it says
have
that,
on retainer.
Yes.
the way this is written, it says that the tenant or the landlord may be entitled to that
Correct.
in the case that the judge decides that the thing is frivolous. That's
Absolutely.
kind of like,
That's-
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
It
judge
protects
gonna
both
know
sides.
that's who's abusing the
Pardon?
policy.
It protects both sides. I mean,
Right.
anyone who objects to that is a bad man.
or a bad tenant.
Absolutely.
And I just
Alright.
wanna say, if anybody ever tells me any kind of nonsense about this committee, this council not caring about tenants, I will say that on a night when we were predominantly landlords, this got a lot of support and actually got more teeth than when the village board
From a
said.
landlord.
Sure.
Yeah. Might be some landlords who don't care for it.
Which is
Well-
something we do need to
I'll
discuss,
deal with that.
at least briefly, because I don't know what the situation is with Kenny, as far as like,
He resigned.
he did,
Yeah.
okay. We weren't sure at the last meeting whether that he was gonna like write out his term or not.
Who's Kenny was the gentleman who was always sitting over there?
Yes, no, that's
No,
Jack.
no, he was sitting over
Jack.
here.
Yeah.
And he moved out of district.
Okay, and what about the other young lady?
Anna.
That's the other person. So I called her like a month or so ago and was like, hey, just want to know what's going on. Because like last time I knew, she was like moving, or like temporarily moving out of her current residence with her partner to go stay at home and get like some healthcare stuff going on. So, because we all were familiar with like her stuff. So she was trying to like get to the bottom of that. But was gonna try and still like stay on the council because like, she still kind of technically had a residence here. She was just, convalescing. But I was like, just want to see if you're still trying to stay on the council or if you talked to anyone about it. I recommended she talk to the village clerk to find out like what the rules were or whatever. And I haven't heard back from her. We've seen no emails. So I don't really know how to move forward. I can definitely try calling her again and see if, if I don't get a response, I don't really know what else to do.
What we can do.
So, yeah, I don't know, we can ask the board to remove her.
If she
you know.
misses enough meetings, then she's.
Yeah, I mean,
involved.
that's true too.
Yeah, we can cross that bridge when we have someone to
But
replace her.
well, that's the thing too, is, so that leaves us with one tenant representative. And then me, who like talks like a tenant but doesn't vote, so,
I think with this board, you have a pretty good representation of people willing to do the right thing.
no, definitely, but we definitely need to, we wanna be proactive as far as like, if we do need to fill 2 seats.
And
You know,
you
to-
can always look for a student.
Right.
My wife said when I left tonight to come over, maybe you look, for an older person.
I
or a
asked my
middle-aged.
in-laws, I asked my in-laws, but they both rent in the village, and
Uh-huh.
neither of them.
Well, I'm just throwing out, but let me say this to what you said, where I work for a truck dealership. Now, we send out a survey to our customers just to make sure our service department in particular is doing the right thing. What do you think about the idea of having the tenant, when they leave, send in a survey to some location saying, yeah, I rented at Valerie's or at Ed's, it was a great experience, and have that, you can't do that?
I'd be dead set against it.
Oh, I
Really?
Yep.
Me too.
Okay.
Because every
Just-
tenant
just
who
for the
never
burden.
rented from me has the worst things to say about me that you've
Oh,
ever,
alright.
and every landlord
It's
is
just a
subject to
burden.
that.
If that has to be sent somewhere, someone has to be paid to receive it and organize it and collect it and make it
If they want
public.
to survey, review you, they'll do it on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah, and now
Sign
with,
off.
Purchase?
Perchin,
Right.
it actually has,
Oh, it has
I think
something.
the internet is
Okay.
catching up to
Alright.
the point where we won't have to take on that expense.
My thought was if you got good reviews, then it would encourage the landlords to really do the right way
Right.
by the
Right.
tenant.
And I
But
think
Well, I
it's
don't
a
know
good-
if
it's a
that's
good
right
thought, but I think social media is
Can we,
ahead of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can we hit number 2, because that's been on the agenda for, I
to
think,
find,
ever since I've been here.
Education
video
outreach
protocols?
or the video
No, number
protocols?
2, define video protocols for non-council members.
We did
report.
that.
We did that, I
Two
accidentally left it on the agenda when I rewrote it, sorry about that.
3 is dead, nobody's
scratch
here.
that.
Nobody's here.
6, I think we
6 is
talked about that. and
Yes.
Reach
May I ask
out
a
to
question?
you, we can work on
All
that.
You're the
right.
chair, you
Which
can-
one-
Yeah,
which
I
one's
might be
dead?
light about.
Right.
What's that?
Which one's dead? Which one's dead?
All right, everybody.
Okay, 2 and 3.
For the committee.
I have,
Was this not still that same person?
Number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay, thank you very much. I have a non-student tenant that I think might be an awesome asset to this committee. I've not asked her or spoken with her about it. She's I've seen some of her Facebook posts. She's been my tenant for over a year. How do we feel about having landlords and tenants who have a business relationship sitting on the committee simultaneously?
That's a really good question.
I think you have to have her submit her
Yeah.
interest to the village board. The village board, when they interview, should ask that question and let them decide. It's not up to us to decide.
No, I just figured I'd run it past before.
I
Like,
think,
I
yeah.
like to hear everybody's opinions. You make me think in other directions.
It's a very good question to ask.
I think that's
I mean,
something that we hadn't considered as a
weird.
potentiality, that we might end up with somebody who's a landlord and somebody who's a tenant of that landlord on the same council. It would be an interesting dynamic.
It
I'm
would
not sure
be
how that
fun.
would work.
Yeah. Without speaking
Well,
for
would
the
it be
rest of the
fun or
board.
would it be mutually silencing?
Yeah.
See, that's
Oh, you
the
know, that's a good
question.
point. Is somebody going to be afraid to speak up because? I mean, well, that's just a question that we'll ask when we interview
Yeah.
the
You
candidate.
guys
You know,
have to deal
to
with
your point.
Well, I think she's quite
And-
frank. I think that's one of the reasons why she's come to mind. But
So,
But
yeah,
like you
because,
said-
I mean, to my point, and I don't want to speak for anyone else that's on the board, if we have a vacancy and someone wants to be here, I'm not going to stop them,
okay,
you know?
okay. Now pass it by her and see what she thinks.
The pups are calling, so I'm gonna have to get going. But
Okay.
I'll throw this one more thing. I had mentioned it once before, and he happened to, I went to the beer store, I saw Corey. And, you know, Corey Berkman, he's the fire inspector.
Okay, okay, yes.
You know, the young guy. He still would like to come here at some point and explain what the fire department does when they have to go to an apartment. Not, I don't mean for a fire, but for, I think like when we had
He's
the
an inspector.
policeman, he's an inspector, he could tell us, you know, the things that the fire department looks for. And you know Corey, so maybe if you see him there, just,
Well,
As
let's
I
send him
said,
a
just-
formal invitation.
yeah.
To come and
because
do a
I saw him
presentation for us.
last week, he said, you know, I'd love to come, he's working at Rosendale too now. And of course, I think he's the assistant captain or the captain.
He's one of the,
And he's, you know, a good guy, very knowledgeable.
very much so.
Well,
And
thank you
but
for having me.
Before you
Thank you
run,
very
I just
much.
want to throw out one thing for next month's agenda.
Uh-huh.
Because it is cost efficient to submit a lot of legislation at once rather than piecemeal, if anybody else has anything else that we can roll into the security deposit, so that way the board can have a comprehensive unit. Like, there were lots of other things that we discussed that are the tenant union suggestions that we never kind of got anywhere with. So if anybody has anything else, let's for next month really focus on coming back and saying, what else do we want to recommend that the board do if they're looking at code to try and tighten it up?
So
Well,
we're
that's
talking
what
about riders.
I was just gonna ask you, I mean, this law came from Tim and you on the board. What is the next thing that the board is looking at? Is there anything that's a pinpoint right now? or
Yeah,
priority?
I agree.
Well, this came from Tim. This did not come from Tim, and I let him know I felt that there could have been better communication, and he definitely was very interested in getting everybody's feedback. I think we got great feedback, but as far as actually having a comment and getting this approved and out, I'd like to have, you know, any other pieces that we would like the board can just consider, I would like to have by the end of the meeting next month. That way we can have a comprehensive set of recommendations and say, this is what the group thinks. Or if there's anything that the group doesn't agree on, but some people feel strongly on, we can say the board, some people on the board would like to see this, some people would like that, just to generate the discussion amongst the village board and then we can task the attorney with getting to the desired result that we're trying to find.
Any particular topics that you're thinking of?
Anything, I don't want to limit anyone at this table. If you have something that you want us to consider, get it out there, let us consider it.
We
But
would,
anything that has to go to the lawyer, you want to condense so that you
Yeah,
save
so-
money.
Well, because, if, say the village board decides, okay, we want to pass this deposit law,
Right.
when we pass that, if we're passing everything at once, instead of coming back 6 months later and saying, we would also like to do this
Yeah,
around rental
do it all
rights,
at once.
do it all at once because it's more cost effective.
we were reviewing a, legal legislation that was proposed by Kenny regarding, restrictions on credit checks.
Yes, and that's one of the
And
things.
it was definitely, we had not reached a consensus on that. There was like a few points that we were arguing into the wee hours, well, we were debating into the wee hours about, which we didn't really come to a, but there's only, what, like 3 of us at that point? We just kept going and going and going. So, but, with more people present, that would be something we would be, I mean, I guess we could say, well, these people said this, these people said. But that we're closest to being ready
Yes,
to
the
put
credit
forward.
checks.
Yeah, well, and perhaps maybe it makes sense.
Right?
Uh,
Or no,
that was when, there was Celeste was here,
Well,
and then it was
right.
the one right after
But
Celeste
then
was here.
Kenny had a much more detailed,
Yeah.
kind of like, already in like legislative format.
Yeah, and
Wasn't
I-
everybody in
propose.
favor
And
of
there was-
not
there was
allowing
not
credit
credit
checks?
checks.
Issues.
I did a lot of work on that. After Kenny made his presentation, I did a lot of work on it. And what stuck out to me was he kept saying, if I show you a pay stub, that should be sufficient. And I sat there and said, well, yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense
No,
because
it
I don't
doesn't.
know what's behind from a debt standpoint.
Right.
I know plenty of kids who are maxed out on their credit cards. Sure, they have a paycheck, but that paycheck is already accounted for. And there's no way that I would want to hinder somebody from doing their, or having the right to make sure that the person that they're renting to has the ability to pay
Has
their rent.
anybody ever moved in without the security and first month's rent or whatever that you asked for, and just never paid rent after that?
Yes,
For me, no.
yes.
Me, yes.
For other people, yes. And I'm not here just speaking for myself. I hope everybody understands.
But I mean,
I
that's
talk with about
also-
6 or 7 other
Right,
landlords who
but
are
that's
in different
also
situations.
just because, like, somebody, just the opposite of that, like, I could have twice as much money as I have to pay out every week for my weekly paycheck,
Correct.
and I could still just not pay you the rent.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
That's why.
Yeah, but that,
and like,
But the
you know what I
fact
mean?
is,
But
Like,
that's your
but
choice.
also
Sorry,
with,
if you can make it
No,
go
that's
on.
okay.
Thank you.
I thought that we,
Good
when
night.
we said, but what we said was that the references from a previous landlord would take care of that in a better fashion, actually. I mean, you could have a good or bad credit score and just be irresponsible paying your bills, but if your previous landlord said, oh my God, the first month they were banging my door down with money, fistful of money, or, I had to dog them every month, it was horrible. So there's your reference, and
If
there's.
I have,
It's, yeah, the
if
credit
there
check
is some-
just perpetuates, I'm sorry, the credit check just perpetuates a system that is exclusive and absolutely unfair to people who have strong work ethic, but,
who had their identity stolen.
thank you. So,
I get it, but if there's somebody looking to rent who,
right,
you're telling me I don't have a right to know that. I have to rent to somebody without having the ability to look at that.
I don't know what the.
And again, I have never run a background check. I have never run a credit
I
check.
never have
But
either.
I am not going to speak for other landlords from a standpoint who need that.
And the other thing that you discussed in that meeting was taking a cosigner. I will not rent
That,
that.
well, that was the sticking point. The cosigner was the sticking point that not everybody could really come to a consensus about. I'm still not ready to like yield that yet, and I feel like we should have a larger discussion. And that I feel like would be better discussed when we have more tenants who can vote.
Well, there's no voting. I mean, it's a discussion.
Well, no, I mean tenants that can have a discussion, and but whether there's a you guys decide to vote on okay, yes, we all agree on this thing together, or there's mixed reviews. Here's what everybody
But,
said. But regardless, so.
I'd like to.
But it's still, the point remains, like, whether or not you do a credit check on someone, whether a person has the money or like,
I mean,
And you have just a pay stub when you decide to rent to a person. So, and
Yes.
again, like you've also said, you've never ran security checks before.
But I don't want
And we
to-
also have to remember that like running someone's security check was what? How long ago did that become like a reality even? Like when did like I don't know
12 years ago?
Experian and all those other
About that.
those three evil horrible corporations that are accountable to no one could just accumulate all this personal information about people and then use it against them. So there was a time when landlords didn't have that as an option. And, you know,
That was
things
a
went
long
pretty
time
much.
ago.
Very long time ago, but
Yeah,
it's-
well, yeah, it was called like, you know, before the 90s. That wasn't that long ago.
It was
No, it
called
was way
before the
before then.
70s.
It was
Well,
way
yes,
before
okay,
then.
sorry, I'm sorry. Easily
But-
through the internet.
But yes, so,
But doing a credit check on paper, filling out paperwork before there was the internet, that was a whole different ballgame. So anyway, go ahead, Rob. I'm good.
no, I'm just saying that there has to be a balance. Landlords, especially landlords who rent to a lot of people, they can't do in-depth interviews with 14 people in that person's life to get a balanced view of that person's
Oh my
reliability.
gosh, anybody at
You know,
14 or
well, you know what I'm saying.
I'd be like,
Um,
hey, Brandon.
But they need to have some practical way of making those judgments. And sometimes those judgments, you're going to think a person was reliable and they end up not being, unfortunately. Have been demonstrated to be inaccurate as far as whether a person. The credit check has nothing to do with whether a person is going to adhere to their obligations.
That's an absolutely false
You
statement.
really think so?
Absolutely, it's a false statement.
Wait, in what way?
Because I think that there's a lot of
If-
people who have very poor credit history who nevertheless, on a one-to-one basis, are really responsible.
If somebody sits there and tells me, Ed, I have a job, I make $1,000 a week, I'm making $50,000 a year, but they have $60,000 in credit card debt, and their monthly obligation is, say, $700, $800, $900, they won't have the ability to pay.
No, you're right.
That's my
And they've
point.
already demonstrated that they're not paying quite often. Quite frankly, my credit is
But if you put
horrible.
their previous landlord,
But
that
similar
What if
ones
they-
are
what if
things
they
that
are
are outside
previous
of one's
landlord?
control.
So,
I'd much rather
somebody who
rely
made
on my voodoo
$1,000
than use
They
it.
live, they
But I
live
don't
with their
want somebody
parents.
else to take away my right to do it
They
if I
live
feel
with their
like
parents,
it's
they ran
So
up
it's
all
about
this
a
debt.
reluctance.
nobody
They
who's
got-
making that much money
Right
a week
from
is living with their
anybody.
parents.
Right.
Actually, no, that's not
false,
true.
too.
That's not true.
Absolutely
It's
false.
definitely rare.
So
Have you
again,
ever,
the reason I brought this up is that seemed to be a very interesting conversation going on. And from the village board standpoint, I'd like to know where the village is on this, because my guess is that that's gonna be coming down. If I was a betting man, there would be that would be the next law coming
on the
down.
pipe.
and
So-
we can, I don't know if I have an electronic copy, I'll have to ask Kenny for that. So we can show you what he proposed, and then, you know, obviously you already know the points of contention. I think honestly that was pretty much, what it came down to was the cosigners. And me and Kenny were like, yes, no cosigners, with the exception of if they cannot prove income. And they were like, no, which is, you know, what they
If you
so
think
that
about
was
it,
the sticking point. I think other than that, everybody was cool with most of it.
my family tenants are people who struggle or are waiting to amass enough that they will stay with me to get a bigger apartment next year. Or they've just gotten out of college. And for them, those that have stayed, I know they have massive debt because they used student loans to pay my rent the last 3 years. So I know they're not gonna pass a great credit check. But I decline or choose to require a cosigner at my discretion. When I know that somebody is showing that they're working, that they have a plan, that they have been committed to paying through the last 3 years, then I'm gonna work something out with them. Reputation is like amazing, and you're very giving and, all right, so I'm not gonna ask you for a credit check or as an adult working and volunteering to give me a cosigner. That would kind of, but I want that. I trust my
I
voodoo
would
more,
I would
but
say,
I usually say, yeah.
I would say, one, just, what I learned in my adventure having my identity stolen, by, it was a family member.
Lovely.
you know, we should know what they are. So, just because, and this is the other reason why credit checks can be kind of misleading. Because just because somebody shows that they, yeah, someone's skateboarding on a roof, obviously. No, it's definitely a skateboard. No, it's not. So if somebody has $60,000 in debt showing on paper, once that goes to the collection agency, and they like for asking like for children and stuff for a while, they make a deal with you, and you end up paying like 25% of your that way, because they bought the debt for $20,000, and they're just gonna squeeze you for whatever it's debt. So just because something shows somebody has $60,000 in debt doesn't necessarily mean that they're paying, that they have to pay out, you know, everyone. So as far as like the whole credit check thing is co-signers, I mean, I don't know, I feel like that's something we should definitely still discuss. And well, you said you did some research on this, or?
I've done a lot of research, more than I really care to, but, you know, with everything that we're doing, I'm trying to look at it from the tenant's point of view. I know where I'm at it from a landlord's point of view. I'm really trying to sit there from the tenant's point of view. And when I was reading this, I really never even thought about what is a credit check. I mean, has any of you actually really thought what's on a credit check?
I know already.
What's on it?
See how much?
So everything that you've ever opened, whether it's a credit card or a student loan, your phone bill, like pretty much anything where they can get your social security number, when you know, your Time Warner cable, whatever,
Well, anything that's
all of
rotating.
those
Does it
things.
show if you've ever been evicted?
Well, I wouldn't know, because I've never been evicted, so it wouldn't have been on
On
my
your credit
personal
report,
report.
you can tell if the tenant's ever been
You know, it
evicted,
does, if being evicted affects
drowning
your
in
credit
debt.
report.
or later delinquent on their bills, or if they're involved in lawsuits. I said, okay, so let me read a little bit further. While a credit check can be useful when you need to be sure that you are running checks legally, provided intelligently. Okay, good. You cannot run credit checks.
Who's enforcing that?
You can, who's enforcing any of this? We're just
Lots of
talking
people
about stuff.
enforcing lots of things.
But the information you gather from a credit report is useful, but you should not use it as the only means of selecting a tenant. There are professional tenants who supply false information. There are also good tenants who may have fallen on hard
There's
times.
also credit check companies that provide false information.
Of course. Well, listen,
And who,
If
why
I-
would you
if
trust
I-
a multinational corporation over an individual
it's
in front of you?
one
One is
tool.
not
It's
necessarily
one
more
tool
valuable.
that is
Finish
available.
hearing, I want to finish hearing the.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
It is one tool.
Some of these points
I
are really
understand
not
your
good
passion,
points.
and
No, I do,
it's
I
great.
see.
But
None of
I'm
it's
trying to look
actually-
at it, of course it is. For you to sit there and say that none of this is relevant, it's relevant.
I'm not saying it's not relevant, I'm saying none of that is a persuasive argument against getting a credit check.
Sure it is.
I disagree.
And
But
let's agree to disagree.
Well,
And again,
I'd
some
like to hear the
prospective
rest of
tenants
what
may
you
be
said.
too young to establish credit. I mean, these are all things that, again, I know who I'm renting to, but you have landlords here who have hundreds and hundreds of units. And you have interesting people moving into town who you don't know anything about, who you can't get a reference from. And guess what? If someone's moving into town who wants to get into an apartment, sure, I'll give 3 references. Guess who I'm giving? My 3 friends. I work for Robin. You know, I live with Dennis. So they could all be false. So they can be falsified any way you want. So there are people out there who own properties who need the credit check
these
as an
credit checks
additional
are not
tool.
any more reliable than Joe Schmo
Yes, they
moving
are.
into
Yes,
town.
they are.
Giving you fake references.
I'm sorry, I
They're
think this is
not.
one of the things that needs to be between the landlord and the tenant, written up in the lease. If the landlord wants to go and volunteer credit reference, they should be entitled to. And in the lease, and you know, the other thing, I think that was brought up at one point, well, first of all, the first month where they don't pay. Then you're involved in evictions and all that kind of thing. But for myself, since I deal with students, I have a very specific window when people are looking and when they're not. And if I get a person in here in October, they decide, look, I'm not paying the due check, I'm probably gonna have an empty room for a long time because everybody's where they are.
Market's closed.
So I think this is something, just like the subletting I said before, if you wanna sublet to It's my business.
To be
My
complete.
business.
Okay,
To
may I,
be
may I-
used, yes.
okay. I arguments for and against credit checks. To people who support credit checks for employment purposes, well, this is employment, argue that credit histories show integrity, reliability, and important money management skills. On the other hand, those who are against credit history say it doesn't take into account that some people have had extreme financial setbacks. Okay, I can understand how, as a landlord, you might want to know that. However, I can also understand how, as a tenant, you might be moving into a renting situation after having lost the house that you owned, and you're gonna have to live somewhere and make a start. Now, maybe that's not really a safe space for the landlord to be at, taking on that risk of somebody else's new start. I get that, I see the balance there. It creates a vicious cycle. If someone loses a job and can't pay bills, their credit might take a hit, then they might not be able to get a new job because they couldn't pay their bills, and as a result of losing the other job. So that's part of my argument against the credit checks. I mean, first, how many applications does a student or a renter put in when they're looking for a place to live in New Paltz? And every one of those is going to be hit on the credit score, all right?
No, I don't take an application and I don't do a credit score.
I mean, if they do credit
So
checks.
that, but almost every landlord that's sitting here says we don't do them.
Right,
So
but we're not
why
talking
would-
about you, we're talking about like all
I don't
of
want to
us.
stop your train of thought, but I only have one comment to add.
Okay,
If every apartment in New Paltz was for the same rent, I would agree with you. But you have high rents, you have low
Sure.
rents, and not everybody is entitled to the high rent apartments, because if they can't afford it, they can't afford it. But there are other options available, and that's where the landlords need, if I'm a landlord with three different, I got an apartment for 500, an apartment for 1,000, an apartment for 1,500, and that tenant wants the $1,500 apartment, but they can't afford that, but they can afford the 500, I shouldn't have that right to sit there and say, this is an apartment that is suitable. You can afford that, but you can't afford that. You're taking that right away from me to make that determination.
And anybody that was smart is not, like it says in Ed's research, you're not using the credit check as your
Solely.
own, as the only way of deciding on whether or not you're right.
You know, there are some insurance companies I won't buy insurance from because they base who they will give insurance and what your rates are based on credit checks. I won't
Right.
even participate in Geico or whatever it is that does their insurance that way. I don't even ask them for a quote because I don't think that's the right way to do that type of
For
business.
this to be one of many things used to determine, like it says even in there, to decide whether or not to rent to a person, it's not worth, one, the fact that a lot of this information is misleading, false information. It's a huge, huge thing. People being mistaken for other people and having other people's stuff being put because they have similar names, etc. But also, like Robin said, the multiple hits to your credit score when you're trying to find a new job and a new place to live, and you're applying to all these places in an area in a short period of time, that's going to just make it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. The way that it's discriminately used, and not to mention that like these companies have almost no accountability to anyone. To anyone.
This isn't
There
the
are
way to
no,
stop
there,
them.
aside from like nonprofits, there's no watchdogs over these companies, which is why people's credit reports are constantly false, and they're mixing up people with other people, and that's a huge part why they're used in racist and classist
I was
ways.
going to bring that up.
Like,
That's
the-
one of the biggest
like,
arguments
if-
against it is that it is racist
Yes.
in many cases.
If these credit companies were regulated and by the government, and like there was all these restrictions and regulations over how this information was used and recalled and double checked and fact checked, and these reliable sources that were not used in terrible classist and racist and discriminatory ways, we wouldn't have as much of an issue with it. But it's just not worth it.
I wanna cut you off just for a second, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm done.
I wanna simplify it a little bit. I got a hammer. It's a tool.
Are you gonna smash the paper?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
they know.
a tool, and used appropriately, it will put a nail in a wall. Used inappropriately, I can bash someone's head in it with it. So it's not the tool that's bad. It's the way some people are using it.
No, it's whether or not that hammer is faulty. If the head of that hammer is not functionally and properly attached, if Ralph Nader did not inspect the quality of that hammer, or the regulations on that hammer, that's what we're talking about.
Okay,
We're
can
talking
I-
about the hammer
But you
itself.
can't, but you
Let's-
can't penalize all of the users because they're abusers.
I can penalize the manufacturer for
Can I-
providing an
can I-
unsafe hammer.
Can I provide a slightly more apt metaphor?
Yes, please.
English teacher, public school, this is a standardized test. That's what it is. There's everybody against one set of criteria. Should it be used as the only way to measure a person's achievement? Absolutely not. Is it frequently the only way that people are measured on their achievement? Absolutely, because it's a shortcut that doesn't take a lot of time. When students are sorted when students apply to college, the very first thing, high SAT, middle SAT, low SAT. Let's get rid of these guys, let's look at these. And you could have some brilliant people down there who test poorly. Same thing here. The credit score is not, it's a standardized method that may not reflect the nuances of people who would be excellent tenants. However, that being said, perhaps maybe this comes down to an education thing. Leaving it as an option with strong encouragement not to use the credit score as the determining factor of whether or not to rent to a person. But I don't know how to educate that way.
But SATs are also a really great metaphor because they're also racist, classist,
Exactly. Well,
biased,
anything
women,
that's-
like all of those things. If those
anything
were
that's-
accurate reflectors that provided for diversity and all of those things, and were accurate predictors,
Anything that's standardized is going to be
The
standardized
most-
towards the norm
yes.
of the dominant
What
population.
And the
what
most
do you mean by
accurate predictor of
standardized?
future
I'm having a hard
behavior
time
is
with
past
standardized.
behavior.
Okay, so a standardized test is one where it's applicable to an entire population. It's a test that doesn't take anything about context, doesn't take anything about background, doesn't take anything about independent or flexible scoring into account. So here, like the SAT, it's given nationwide.
Correct.
It's absolutely, it doesn't reflect, and this is part of the problem why a lot of different communities don't do well. Some communities you have huge SAT scores throughout the entire community. Other communities, you have very low SAT scores. It's not because those people are stupid. It's not because they had a bad education. It may be because they're not exposed to the same cultural cues that are provided in the materials in that test. And this is something that really started getting examined in the 70s and the 80s, and we sure still haven't figured out exactly how to sort that, because we have test questions every year that go out for review, where it turns out, oh, whoa, we didn't see that this would not properly reflect the skills of the students. So, credit scores, standardized measurement.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Why?
An SAT is a test that someone takes in 11th grade that shows what they learned over what?
Doesn't show what they learned.
It shows how they did on a score. A background check, credit score, shows what they've done over the last 7 to 10 years.
According to the measurement, according to a standard measurement of how those
Sure,
credit
if you were
companies.
delinquent on payments, if you were evicted, if you're in a lawsuit, that is a tool that people are used to evaluate. You don't just sit there and get a credit report and say, C, this person's a C. You can actually see what they did.
But nobody does that. People look at the number and say, well, oh, this person's a 520. Not
I
really
know
that.
exactly why
I-
my credit score is bad and how
Oh,
it got
I
that way.
know why, but if I were renting to 50
Yeah,
people,
but that
and
goes.
if credit scores were the way I made that decision, I would put all those low
You have
credit
no
scores to the
tenants.
bottom. No, it's the bottom. I look at the
But
top
you
ones
have no
first.
tenant. You wouldn't have enough to fill your building.
But the point being, I mean, I hear you, I totally hear you, but the point being, it is a tool that is used in that manner as a cutoff. I
By
would look,
I would sit there.
It doesn't matter.
But I
It
would
doesn't
sit there and say, credit score, when you're looking at getting credit, the lower your credit, the the higher your interest rate would be if you wanted to take a loan out. Why? Because you are higher risk to default. That's really what it is. Yeah, some people may have, listen, if you have a 530 credit score, I'm not renting to you. Well, you can't stop that landlord from doing that. That's a metric that he uses. But other landlords, if they get the report, okay, well, why is this?
Other places that ban credit checks, it is possible to say, no, you can't do that. It is possible to ban credit checks. And the reason to do this is like, okay, if somebody's got bad credit, whether it's through their own fault or not, whether or not they're, you know, if they're trying to remedy it, or if it's not their fault, or if it's not even accurate information, if they can't find a home, this is increasingly problematic. And I understand that not all landlords do this, but ever increasingly, more and more landlords and more employers are using this to deny people housing and to deny people jobs.
I take exception to you saying that everybody's entitled to housing, because not all housing is equal. And what you're saying is...
I mean, I think everybody's entitled to housing in general. I don't know if everybody's entitled to any particular house.
Yeah, but again, like I said, if I have 3 different houses, you know, low price, medium price, high price, what you're saying to me is I have no right to make sure that the person who I'm putting in one of those, I have no right to check if they have the ability to pay. And one of those tools is a credit check. You're taking that away from me.
Yes.
Well,
Because
that
it is discriminatory, it's unfair, it's inaccurate, and it is
you're saying everybody's everyone's credit report is
on a staggeringly high number.
what percentage?
Let's do some research.
No,
Those reports are out there. There are
you
not
are sitting here.
Okay, take it down.
I'm sorry that I don't have them memorized, but you can find them yourself.
I will.
My property that I have given blood, sweat, and tears to have, I have the right to use any tool that I want to use to make sure it's a good fit for the both of us.
I'm
And the
gonna
same way as you
disagree.
said, the 25% bite on the security deposit is an incentive for somebody to do what they're supposed to do there. I have 7 children. I have some with lousy credit scores, and I have some with medium and some with good. And the ones with the lousy ones, I say, listen to me. You are being penalized because of your sloppy and lazy payment habits of stuff. And if, when you go and get insurance and this and that, and a car payment, you are wake up, do what you're supposed to do.
Or it's a woman who
I
just
hear
got
you. At the
divorced.
same time, yeah, and that's another issue, but at the same you said that you have the right to use whatever tools are available to find out.
Legally.
But and there are other fields where tools that used to be used to determine whether or not well, for example, employers. There are certain questions employers used to be able to ask that they're not allowed to ask anymore. So such as are you going to get pregnant? You know, are you planning on getting married? And they're not allowed to ask. They're not allowed to ask why you got fired.
They took out. Yeah, but right now credit checks are illegal. So
They
just
are illegal.
have them taken out of the legal realm, and then we will.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
I wouldn't bother.
We're trying to
doing
take it out of the legal
but
realm.
I think anybody that wants to should be allowed to.
Well, we might have to just make our separate pleas for and against, and then submit them to the
I
village.
think
I think this may be one of those issues, you know.
That you can go and say that the council was divided.
Yeah, with divided, I can say, you know, the points for and against, and
There were
It
rants
would
and
be-
raves
I-
and
I think
threats.
it would be-
We were talking about hammers.
Thank you for the hammer.
but
She did not threaten. She did not threaten.
I think it would be interesting to have some guidance from the village board with act over floating around. If you charged us with a task of, let's focus on this right now.
specific.
I would like them to say, these are the issues that we're contemplating.
Because
We've
we
done
can
some
run
things.
around in
Yeah,
circles.
I
Because-
don't want to do that. I agree with that 100%.
His credit check stuff, so being discussed.
Okay, but just to continue my thought here. If this is the council that's the subject matter experts, I don't want the village board to say, hey, this is what we want to do. I'd prefer if you guys said, hey, this is what we think is valuable. Thinks credit checks are valuable, we'll get that in front of the board. I can get it in front of the board and say, not everyone feels this way, but there is a sentiment on this board just to get it out there and then let the village board discussion go from there. I just don't want the village board with a narrow focus to say, this is what we want to do. And
Oh, I just
galloping
thought maybe they
ahead.
could throw a couple of pebbles out for the first things that they'd like us to approach, but if.
well, I think that's kind of what the deposit was.
Yes.
You know, and just to an earlier point, I do not have any sense that the village board is going to go towards a credit check legislation next. There may be people that support it. I haven't heard anything about it. This is the only tenant-focused legislation that I've heard about or seen. So this may be it, and that's why I really want to see what are we missing that we can include.
Like to
Try and
see
move
added to
forward.
that, because in case I forget by next week, so I gotta put it on the agenda again. That maybe it's to the building department or a piece of code, but I actually would like to see the landlords required. Now I realize it can't be policed, and if only 50% of the landlords give it out, or 20% of the landlords give it out, but if they're giving out the tenant's responsibility thing and signing on the lease that it's done, if there's a penalty for not giving it out, like there is for the lead, we know that those 20% of tenants who got that paperwork are gonna talk about the things that they heard, and their landlord was gonna be fined if he didn't give it out, and maybe we get more landlords giving it out. I think that's one of the best conduits for that education process that I really like to see both the landlords and the tenants engage in. If the landlords are required to give it out, they're gonna read it. If the tenants are required to get it, half of them will read it, or 20% of them will read it, but somebody's gonna read it.
Would we be asking the village to have copies to provide landlords with, or would the landlords be responsible? They could be done electronically or
copy.
paper.
The-
Obviously, electronic is preferable, you know, in the
Well, the thing
environment
is
and
that
stuff,
when you register your building, you get a certain amount of paperwork and the application to fill out. The village can simply email you here's the thing you have to give out, and that should be in your lease.
And we can keep it on the village website. If
It'd be
anybody
on the
needs another
website, and
copy,
anybody
they
can
just go
access
right-
it.
Pull it right off.
But I think that that's a really
But no,
good,
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
that's the only one I have on my mind at the moment. I'm gonna read the act again.
I just wanted to go back to,
the hammer.
no, I want to go back to, I want to go back to Burlington, because 2 months ago, there was a lot of reference to Burlington.
Yes.
And I kind of took exception as to why we were comparing New Paltz to Burlington.
Yeah.
Burlington has 42,000 people who live there. The village of New Paltz in 2015 has 7,000. New Paltz, 30% of the houses in the village are owner occupied, which means 70% are not. And I don't know if they factored in campus with this number or not.
That's a tough.
But the statistics, the median age in New Paltz is 21 and a half. The median age in Burlington is 26 and a half. 58.7% of the residents in the village are between the ages of 18 and 24. So anybody who's going to do a credit check on someone who's between 18 and 24, not going to be much there.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you look at that, only 19% of the population is between the ages of 25 and 44. So we have a very young population. We have
Yeah,
a
but two
lot.
of them are sitting right here at this
We
table.
have a lot of non-owner occupied housing.
Would you like that question answered?
I don't know if I asked a question.
You
I think I
did.
was
You
just
said,
making
why are we
statements.
talking about Burlington?
The reason because
Well,
there's been a lot of reference to Burlington in the
started-
past about this is what Burlington did, this is what Burlington. Burlington had 4 colleges. 2 of them have now closed over the last 10 years.
I started the discussion. The only reason why I watched the first meeting when Celeste came and they were discussing cutting securities to $200. And I happened to
She
be.
actually invoked Burlington too.
She did.
Yeah.
She brought Burlington up, and the next week, my daughter lives in Burlington. They both both of my children went to UVM, and since I was there, I went to find out what they had to say about what was going on, and I only talked to one person. So what I brought back here was the recommendation that we do community impact studies, because this is what they told me is going on in Burlington, which was only one of the various cities that she meant Ithaca and someplace Austin or something in Dallas. I only hit on Burlington because I happened to be there and know about it and go to talk to whom, because my daughter works with Medicaid. I had access to that information. So, it was only one person in their building department or committee I spoke to's opinion that I actually brought back here, just so that I could say, we need to do community impact studies. This person in that community felt that this community was negatively impacted by a decision like this, and we shouldn't make those decisions frivolously.
Right,
And that's how that
the
diffs-
meeting before, that you weren't at, but that.
Right,
So
that was the
this
one
was like,
watched.
that was the one where she was invoking, it's been done in Burlington, why can't you do it here? They do it in Burlington, why can't you do it here? So that's the context of why it keeps getting brought up, but I agree, and I agreed, I've never, ever liked well, they do it over there, let's just drop it in here. No, it's never worked, anywhere.
No.
Sorry, I'm having
Well-
Common Core flashbacks, but, it's the notion of applicability, which once we got all that other information, it's like, oh, yeah, no, it doesn't apply, does it? So yeah,
Right.
but the notion of doing the community impact.
Right, that was the
Is
only
really
part.
the
I only
important
had
factor.
the one example, I only had time to research one example. Don was the only landlord here that night, and there were even votes being made and
And
conversations.
yeah, it was,
I just want to finish what my point is.
Sorry,
Yeah,
yes.
Per capita
Sorry.
income in the village is $17,000. Average rent is $1,000. There's a lot of people who live in the village, based on this data, would have a hard
Can you
time.
repeat that?
Per capita income is $17,968. I have the census government website, I'll send this out to everybody. Per capita is $17,968 and the average rent is $1,018.
okay, I've got a question on that. Do student loans get counted as income?
I'm sorry.
Because-
As income.
Because a lot of that rent is being
Okay, we're
paid
losing quorum
from
still.
student loans.
Financial aid is what you're talking about.
Yes,
I just have,
Yeah, money's coming
Hang
in
out for
from
1
financial aid,
second.
use it rent.
but I'm saying that number, that 17,000,
The perk, I don't know.
does it include the money that comes in from student loans?
Student loans aren't considered income, so I would say no.
So in other words, there's more money coming in that's being used to pay rent than is reflected in that number.
Well, that would be true of every municipality. right?
Absolutely. I'm
Burlington.
just saying that maybe that number is.
All right, rent's the same, but the income. Village and town setup was Geneseo. Geneseo operated in the town. And when you look at their numbers, I mean, their capita income is 13,500. So, yeah, when you're looking at it as a percentage, and the reason I'm bringing this up is credit checks landlords can
Can
use
we-
if they need to.
Ed, can we bring this up at the next meeting, please? There are members.
The meeting's done,
But I don't
so I
want to
just don't want
cut
to
you
cut
off.
anybody off.
I'd rather
It's-
continue.
Again,
I-
I'll send this out.
I do have one more thing. I'm doing my PhD at UAlbany. I've got a class starting this semester that unfortunately is going to meet on Thursday nights. So I'm going things in October and November. Does that put me in the danger zone? Okay. All right.
And I would dare say that
I won't be here in September, so
maybe at
it's
some
not
point,
piggyback.
maybe at our next meeting, can we have this on our agenda to discuss potential alternate nights? Because it's very difficult for me. There was supposed to be a joint meeting
Oh, right,
tonight.
yes.
So every other month I'm gone. Fortunately, the joint meeting was canceled because we didn't have an agenda. But otherwise, I wouldn't have been here tonight. I would
Got
have
it.
missed a lot of it.
Maybe you can send out a question, just email tomorrow. Is there any other night during the month that works for people? And let's get it done now, so for the next meeting.
When there's availability.
And
Yeah,
also
the
when the room's
challenge has been
available.
when there's a room available and people's availability. We've had a lot of challenges in the past, but we've had a little bit of turnover, so maybe we can find a better time to meet in the future.
Okay,
Motion adjourned.
I have to drive. Come on.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Everybody,
Aye.
everybody agree?
Aye.
Oh, because I can't vote.
Sorry to cut you off. They're all going like this.
We could stay here for 3 more hours and talk. I mean, it's-
And I think it's like maybe, 20 after 12 or something.
You know, I remember hearing
Is the
about that
camera off
last
now?
year, but
Yeah.
I will,
About this